Michael Eisner has been called the most powerful man in Hollywood. He heads the world's second largest entertainment company with the world's most recognizable mouse. He has been chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company since 1984. His career began in children's television programming and came full circle when Disney acquired Cap City's ABC in 1995. He has earned a reputation for creative instinct and executive flair. Under his direction, the once fading brand name has become a multimedia empire. I am pleased to have him on this broadcast for a conversation about Disney and about the entertainment world that he is a part of. I am pleased to have you here at long last.
Thank you for inviting me.
A couple of years ago we started this.
Well,
you know, it takes time. Tell me this. When you were at Paramount, had been there, and the possibility of going to Disney opened up, I am told that you had to get on the plane and go see Sid Bass to convince him that you were the right guy for the job. True story?
No, not completely.
All right.
But I did have a conversation with him. What actually happened was that there was a week between Paramount and my going to Disney, and there was a lot of running around as to who should go, and I was being recommended, and I was sitting at home, and I saw coming up my driveway Frank Wells, who later became the president of Disney, and a man by the name of Stanley Gold, who was involved with the company. And I knew as they were coming up the driveway it wasn't going to work. I could just tell in their faces. And so when they got to the house, they were jogging. They had been jogging. They got to their house in their sweaty state, and they said, it's not going to work. The Basses are not really behind you because you don't have enough business experience.
You're a creative guy, but they don't know about the business experience.
Right. So so I said, well, why don't we call them? And Frank said, fine. So I placed a call there in my den, and I had a little speakerphone, and I guess they were all sitting in one room, the Bass family and Richard Rainwater and some other people, and I started talking to Sid, and I said, would you like to know why I should be the chairman of the Walt Disney Company? He said, yeah, I'd love to know. So I then made about a 10-minute speech. I could not tell you what I said, but I said something like the company should be run from a creative point of view rather than a financial point of view. And I just went on for 10 minutes. I have no idea where I got the speech. Maybe I'd seen a bunch of movies like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but I made one of those speeches, and I stopped, and I said, so that's why I think I should be the chairman. And there was silence for about 3 seconds, and Sid said, sounds good to me, okay.
Let's go.
And I thought to myself, and I almost said, oh, what did you say? But then I learned how to take yes for an answer, which a lot of people don't understand. And I said, okay, thanks. And that was it. And Sid Bass, I have since learned, he's a friend of mine, that he really did want me, but he wasn't sure and he wasn't convinced, and there was another candidate that may have been better, and he was leaning the other way. And when I spoke, I seemed to say the things that he wanted to hear. That and the fact that I had my only press in my life had come out the day before or the week before. I was on the cover of a magazine, and I was there with my wife and my 3 children and my dog. And he has told me later that he had just seen that cover and thought, well, he looks like a family guy.
He looks like a guy.
Maybe he could run a family
right
company.
For Disney.
Right.
Yeah. You and Frank Wells, what was the relationship, as the story goes, that led him to say, I'm not the right guy for this. The right guy is Eisner. That's not what most friends do.
Well, Frank was quite an extraordinary man. As you know, he was killed in a helicopter crash about 3 years ago, and a very selfless man. And I did not know him that well. I was running Paramount, or co-running Paramount with Barry Diller. Well, honestly, he was running Paramount. I was number 2 at Paramount.
Diller's probably watching every phone call.
Right, I have to get the pecking order right. Frank had been running Warner Brothers, and he had run it from a legal point of view. He was a Rhodes Scholar and a lawyer, and a terrific lawyer, and he recognized that these kinds of creative companies are better served by a creative person rather than a so-called non-creative person, although he was very creative. And when I said to him, I don't think you can have co-heads. The buck has to stop somewhere. You have to have one person who is the head. And I really don't want to go into this, Frank, unless I'm the head. I heard myself saying, I probably would have gone into it on any basis, but I did say that. And he said, okay, you're right. I'll go in as the number 2. And when he said that, I knew it was going to be a great partnership. Not because I got to be number 1, which I wanted to be, but because I was going to be with a person who was completely selfless, and he understood that a strong end is the best way to head, not a murky end.
The company today, you acquired, the big acquisition was Cap Cities ABC. And the big acquisition, I assume, within that was ESPN. You wanted Cap Cities ABC, why?
Well, it's very complicated, but a lot of it has to do with first of all, I worked there for 10 years before I went to Paramount. I know ABC very well. I felt that for our company, the cultures were similar between the ABC people and the Disney people. I knew them both very well, and maybe it was partly my culture and partly where I grew up. I thought it was very important to continue the ability to have the Disney products distributed. We're going on the air this weekend with The Wonderful World of Disney again on Sunday nights.
Up against 60 Minutes.
Up against 60 Minutes. We're back on Saturday morning with Disney franchise programming. We have the Disney Channel, which is now being distributed by ABC. Sports has always been an important part of both Disney and ABC, and ESPN had a successful launch. The management under Tom Murphy has been fantastic. I understand everything about ABC. It's something that we could acquire that I would know from day one how to do it badly or how to do it well, but at least I would know the difference. And it just seemed like we had an enormous ability for debt. For people that know a lot about corporations, no debt is a bad thing. Hard to believe that. It's hard for me even to say that because I kind of loved having no debt.
No debt is a bad thing.
But under-leveraged is not utilizing the structure of our system in the best possible way. You can also have too much debt, but none was probably not the most effective structure. We had a lot of debt capacity, so we had the financial wherewithal to do it. We had a very strong balance sheet, and more than anything else, we had a cultural need to merge.
And you had a place you could put a lot of Disney product.
We had a place that you could distribute Disney product, and ABC had a particularly good management. So we knew that the combination of our management and their management would be a nice mix.
Then why isn't ABC doing better?
Well, I think ABC is doing very well, and I'll explain. You know, when you have a company as large as ours, let's go back to the family analogy. If you have 10 kids or 8 kids, for every kid to be Phi Beta Kappa and be the most greatest kid and just have won the soccer tournament is unrealistic. One kid's going to be having a problem in English, one people's going to be having a problem in history, one kid's going to, dropped out for a year, another kid is going to become a PhD. You just can't.
Okay, so theme parks are doing well.
So you can't expect everything to do great. In the ABC Capital Cities realm, just to isolate that, most of ABC is doing better than we expected. ESPN, for instance, is dramatically bigger than we thought it would be. ABC Radio, dramatically bigger than we thought it would be. The owned stations, ABC owns stations in about 20% of the country, dramatically better than we thought it would be. The whole international way ABC is organizing ESPN and the Disney, dramatically the way it would be. On the ABC television network, there are areas that are absolutely booming. ABC News is as strong as I've ever seen it. When I was at ABC, ABC News was a lost...
But that was a long time ago. It was almost called the Almost Broadcasting Company at that time.
Right, and it was a lost leader, and ABC News was there because it had to be there. It was kind of your responsibility. Now ABC News is dynamic.
You give Roone Arledge credit for that.
I give Roone Arledge credit for it. I give Tom Murphy credit and Jim Burke credit for it, and the management of Dan Burke, excuse me. Jim Burke was at Johnson.
Jim Burke was at Johnson & Johnson. Dan Burke's
Dan
brother.
Burke.
Right.
In the network side, just now let's isolate it out into entertainment, which is where people like to
Prime time.
Look at it. Well, before I get to prime time, daytime, very strong. Children's programming, now #1. Sports, very strong. Prime time, they were #1. Their shows aged. They are building back. The season has just begun. For instance, 2020 went on Thursday nights now against ER. It's the biggest inroad we've had against ER in 2 or 3 years. It'll happen. You have to have patience. Nothing happens overnight. A panic would be a bad reaction.
But NBC looks like a locomotive today. My question,
Well, they've looked like that before. ABC was
Well, they were a locomotive before.
ABC was a locomotive. Locomotives run into cabooses every once in a
Well,
while.
that's true. Or they derail. Yeah, but the question is, what does it take to turn around a network or to accelerate it into number one? If you had two hit shows, ABC would again be number one? Are we in that environment today where two hit shows can turn you around in prime time, like ER and Friends did for NBC?
Well, my theory when I worked at ABC in the dark ages, and we were number 4 on a 3-network race. That's how bad we were. We decided to have a hit show every semester. That's what was our goal, meaning in the fall you would try to have a hit show, and in the spring. Just one. And then the next fall and the next spring. And we did that. We had a hit show. It took about 4 or 5 years, we became number 1. If you have, taking the NBC schedule, if you have Friends, Seinfeld, and ER, you're number 1. It's that simple, because you feed into other shows, you spin off shows. So the answer is, if we can get a hit show this fall, another hit show in the spring, another hit show the following fall, we will get to be number 1.
Jaimie Tarses was a mistake?
No, not at all. Not at all. Jaimie Tarses was and is a very bright executive, trained in NBC.
Created Friends. Was involved in bringing Friends over there and having something to do with it.
She certainly had something to do with that. I'm sure other people would take credit for creating it. Everybody seems to create the hits and nobody's around for the failures.
Well,
she knows what she's doing. She's the daughter of a writer who's a very good writer in the entertainment business. She came into ABC in a very volatile time. She came in just after the merger. She came in when ABC started to slide. Not her fault. The show started to age.
So if she needs a vote of confidence, Michael Eisner is here to say, you got it.
Well, I'm here to say that you asked me if she's a problem. She's not a problem. The confidence we need is up and down the line. We thought that she wasn't quite experienced enough to be the head person in California, and we brought in somebody whom she knew very well and whom we knew very well, who actually was really in line for that job anyway. And we think the team of them, Jaimie Tarses and Stu Blumberg, will be very strong. And it's not just they; it's the people that work for them. It's Bob Iger, who's the president of ABC, and an excellent executive. To a lesser degree, me, unless it's successful, and then to a larger degree.
Someone said to me that you said to them once that, I wish that I was anonymous and I could go over there and see if I could program the network. The challenge of turning it around would be great fun for me. You ever say that?
Well,
that thought?
It's not quite. That sounds. Yes, I have had that thought, but let me explain.
You know where I'm going.
But let me explain what that is. In corporations, I've learned, because I've gone from being an usher and I'm now a chairman. So I've been in and I've been there. That's all I know, is how the corporation works. You have very little power at the very bottom, and you have the same amount of very little power, but more respect at the very top. The places that corporations are really run from are the middle.
Right.
When I was in the middle at ABC and I was running programming, or one of the people running programming, I had a fabulous time. I could say things like, "You'll never work in this town again," and have it mean something.
Did you?
No, I didn't. I didn't have the guts to say that, because I never knew when I would see those people on the way down or in another life. But I did also have the ability to say, "Hey, that sounds like a good idea," and I didn't have to really get too many people's approval. When you're very low, nobody listens to you, and you're very high, it's kind of political. So to the extent that I could go over to ABC the way I did in 1974 and just be part of a team and listen to the ideas, because it all starts at the idea. So if you really only are in the process when all the pilots come in and you're looking at the pilots and deciding between 20 ideas as opposed to 2,000 ideas, you're limited in your ability to make change.
All right, here's the point, though. I mean, you are so hands-on. No, come on. I mean, you can't run from that idea. You are so hands-on.
I'd like to be. I'm
that
not.
There's no creative decision made at Disney that you are not part of, and that you don't.
Wait a second. We have 125,000 or 150,000 employees.
Right.
We have. I mean, I could spend the entire hour just describing all of our businesses, and which I'd like to do. I could promote them.
No, we don't have that time.
We don't have that time. There is no way, if I could, if I wanted to, I couldn't be involved. I'm not really, there's just not enough hours in the day to get involved the way you are suggesting, and the way actually the media kind of writes about it. It's funny.
Media is wrong if it says Eisner's too hands-on.
Well, it's not that they're wrong. It's that, first of all, I get much too much credit for the success, and I'm going to get much too much blame for the failure.
Yeah.
Neither of them are exactly accurate. I do express my view if asked. I try to sneak around and find out what's going on. I'm not as bad as Walt Disney, who used to go after it got dark and go into the offices and go through the artist's desk and start looking at what they were drawing, and he'd go through their wastepaper baskets to see if they threw something away that he thought was good. I don't do that.
Does Walt Disney in your head, in your dreams, loom over that company?
I don't think so. I think when I got there, he hadn't been dead that long, and a lot of people said, what would Walt have done in this situation or that situation? And I could see that was very destructive. And
because they were second-guessing themselves?
Yes, they were not going with their own instincts.
Yeah.
They were going with something that had worked in the past, that what Walt probably would have done is something different than he had ever done before, which they could never foresee. And therefore, I never really thought of what Walt would have done. And I hope when I'm not either involved on a day-to-day basis or not involved in something specifically when I'm there, they don't say, what would Michael do? They do what they want to do. They should do what they want to do.
How long do you expect to stay there, assuming good health?
Well, assuming good health, which I have, I would expect to stay there forever, at least as long as I'm alive.
Well, I mean, do you set 65 or 70? I mean, you're 55 now.
Right.
Right. 10 years, you'll be 65.
Right.
Can you imagine leaving at 65?
No.
You can't?
No. No, what would I do?
I don't know.
I'm not good at gardening.
You'd only
don't
care
do that
about
well.
two things, I'm told. Well, three things. One, the Disney company, which has many manifestations, and your family. That's your life.
Yes, well, but my family is complex, and they have very interesting and complex and diverse interests, and Disney is very much involved in many things.
Entertainment, sports,
in the
parks,
artistic, in
everything.
the arts, and in culture, and I love that. I would not be a good doctor. I don't like blood. I would not be. I didn't do well in organic chemistry. I did better in ushering. So
Yeah.
I like what I'm doing. So I can't imagine.
Can you imagine staying till you're 70?
Yeah, sure.
75?
Yeah. I mean, if they will me in, let me look at a pilot.
You're there.
I'm there.
All right. Animation. Some look at what's happening. They look at Hercules and they're saying, Disney ought to be worried. This is not going as good as it used to go. And Lion King was big, and since then, it hasn't been as big. And if animation gets less important to the company, all those subsidiary businesses like consumer products lose their attractiveness. Michael should be worried.
Should I be?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm asking.
No, I mean, I have this conversation with our animation company all the time. We made great movies. Hercules is a great movie.
Not as big a box office as Lion King.
You cannot anticipate a cultural phenomena. The Lion King is the biggest movie and the most profitable movie in the history of the movie business. It is like a Gone with the Wind or an E.T. or something like that. If you plan your business to hit a cultural phenomena, you will hit a cultural dead end. That is insane. What you do, this is like a sports analogy. Say, take basketball. Shoot the ball from the key. Don't throw it half court. If you keep shooting it from the key, it will go in. Some will be ugly.
But that's been your philosophy of making movies.
Absolutely.
Make less expensive movies and more of them.
Well, first of all, make great movies.
Right.
Hopefully they cost less rather than more. But we have made a bunch of movies up to Lion King, whether it was Aladdin or whether it was Oliver and Company or whether it was Beauty and the Beast or Little Mermaid. We then hit Lion King. It went through the roof. Then we made Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Hercules. I'm not sure which one of those movies in 30 years will end up being the classic from our generation. It could be Hunchback of Notre Dame. I would suspect it may be Hunchback of Notre Dame. It could be Lion King because of its box office success. It could be Fantasia 2000. I know what it won't be. I won't mention it, but those movies that we make that are dogs, I get much more upset, I must tell you, by a bad movie that does well than a great movie that does badly. Because a great movie does badly is simply it was what was in the air, the audience wasn't interested, something else came out and took the heat, there was a stench of something.
What's the best example of that recently?
A great movie that didn't do as well
Right.
as expected, I would say, is Hercules.
Okay, but what else? I mean, give me a movie that's not an animation that was a great movie that didn't do as well as it should because of something that was in the air.
Oh, it happens all the time. I mean, I wouldn't even pretend to try
What
to...
was a bad movie that did well and you...
Oh, that really is dangerous for me to say. That is really dangerous to me to say. But you know some
Of course I do.
gigantic
Yeah.
piece of junk that just appealed for that moment to the audience. The problem is when a bad movie does well, and we don't have that many of them. Usually our bad movies do badly. Thank God. Because when a bad movie does well, it's like an earthquake. You lose confidence in yourself. You see a movie in a screening room, it's great. You say, this movie is going to do well. If it does, if you think that, it usually does okay. Sometimes it's The Lion King. Sometimes it's E.T. or whatever. You see a terrible movie, you say, throw it out. It's awful. No, we're going to distribute it anyway. And then it goes through the roof. Then you say to yourself, oh, what did I miss? And I have examples of that, some.
Animal Kingdom is coming on stream, will open when?
Next spring, May 6th.
Cost what, $1 billion?
Cost a lot.
A lot of money.
A lot of money.
Okay. I was told that you were the only guy in-house that wanted to go ahead, that a lot of your colleagues said, don't do this. I mean, it's going to compete with the other stuff we have down there. We don't need it.
I don't think that's true. First of all, there are a lot of people in the design area, what we call WDI, Walt Disney Imagineering, who have been developing this. We developed a lot of ideas for different theme parks, and 90% of them are good, but they seem derivative to me. Too similar to the Magic Kingdom, too similar to Epcot, too similar to Universal Studios or the Disney MGM Studios. The Animal Kingdom from the first day sounded great. Animal Kingdom, that sounds different. So I was like, on one word, was like jumping off the table.
You were ready for it because of the word?
Yeah. Animal Kingdom, dealing with live animals, dealing with mythological animals, dealing with fantasy animals. For the first time, Disney would show a live animal instead of an animatronic animal. I thought that was interesting. I think the only people that would have been against it, and I never remember the dentist or bad news. So
right.
if there were people against it, I don't know. It would be on an economic basis. It would be on
Cost too much, or we have better ways to spend our money.
Well, mostly cost too much, or will it take audience away from the existing parks? But I think most people are enthusiastic about it now.
And you're now in the cruise ship business, too.
We are. That was another one of those jumping off the table
So
things.
as we move to another subject here, what's the biggest mistake you've made since you've been there? Apart from personnel, we'll talk about that later. Apart from personnel.
How much later?
It's coming up soon.
Let's see. Can I fill
You got to go,
for
do you?
another half hour?
No, I don't think so.
I would say
Euro Disney.
I haven't yet. We haven't yet made the kind of mistake that brings a company to its knees yet. And I've always been fearful of that because in most of the corporations that I've worked at before I came to Disney, I saw the one big mistake bring down companies or people. So I'm very conservative to try to stay away from the one devastating mistake. And where the risks are extremely high, as in building a multi-billion-dollar park in an area where there's a massive recession and we don't really know the culture perfectly, like in Europe, we, for our company, on a financial basis, protected ourselves in ways dealing with partners and all the rest of it. So Euro Disney, which is now, by the way, a giant hit, has gone through exactly the same growing pains as Tokyo Disneyland. Now, Tokyo Disneyland didn't get as much publicity here in the negative because we didn't own it. But Euro Disney, we owned more of it. So we had a cultural problem, we had a financial problem, we had a recession problem, we had the French problem, we had the facial hair problem, we had the deodorant problem, we had the beer and wine problem, we had all these problems.
Right.
They all went away. They're all gone. It is going to probably beat Disneyland and the number of people that went to it this year, Disneyland in Anaheim.
Yeah.
It is the #1 tourist attraction in Europe. It is a smash.
Okay. What's the biggest mistake then?
Well, that was the biggest mistake until it turned around.
All right. Boycotts. Do you worry about boycotts? Do you worry about the Chinese government? Do you worry about some fundamentalist Christian groups upset at the Disney company because of its attitude towards its gay employees in terms of offering them full benefits and rights?
Each one of the things that you mentioned I worry about, and each one is a different and unique story. You know, we are in business in China, and a movie was acquired to distribute that is critical of the Chinese as it relates to Tibet.
Because it's about the Dalai Lama.
Exactly. The Chinese are upset about that and have threatened our business in China. We cannot be intimidated to not distribute this movie. At the same time, we have to handle the political consequences of what we do. That is an issue.
So what are you going to try to do? How are you going to handle it?
Well, we're distributing the movie. We're distributing it, and hopefully the Chinese will understand, like in this country.
Hopefully they'll understand.
Well, in this country, you put out a movie, it gets a lot of momentum for 6 seconds and is gone 3 weeks later.
Right.
People that have negative movies out about them in this country learn that's part of the democratic system and it disappears. I think the Chinese government has acted very intelligently on this movie. It is something that is this or a movie about Hong Kong or it's a movie about their sovereignty. And it would be, if we made a movie, I guess, saying that we didn't have any right to own Alaska, even though our country is we're so thick-skinned about criticism that somebody could get, what do you mean we don't have a right to get, we bought it. So the Chinese they're normally upset about this thing. I think they've been very intelligent that they haven't made an international incident out of it. And they know if they don't, the more likelihood is it will come and go. If they make an international incident out of it, the likelihood is it'll be more successful. So I think they've handled themselves extremely well. We keep talking to them, and they understand we have to distribute it, and so forth and so on. That is an issue we have to handle tactfully. Unfortunately, have not been trained in the political environment, and I'm learning. Yes. Henry Kissinger is telling me what to do, and I'm trying to do it.
So you pulled out all the heavyweights you could find to say, how do I handle this big problem?
Yeah, most of them said to me, you're in it, you're in it.
Because,
why didn't you call me first, they said.
Because you got to respect the Dalai Lama, you got to respect human rights, and you can't be, you can't overlook human rights violations and persecution and all the things that some accuse that government of doing.
Well, we do not take as a company a position either in human rights or not in human rights. We are a movie company. We're an entertainment company. The director of this movie, which is Marty Scorsese, has taken a position. Right. I am not sure whether his position is correct or incorrect. I have my own point of view, having read a lot of material about it, but that's irrelevant. If this is a point of view of the filmmaker, that is the difference between our company and a government of another land.
Gay rights for your employees, benefits for couples.
Well, we felt that it was fair and appropriate to give health insurance to people who are either married heterosexually or who have been living together for a sufficiently long time in the homosexual world to be dependent upon one another. And instead of putting the insurance risk on the state in which the person lives or the federal government, we felt it was our obligation for our employees to be able to insure their significant others if there's a long-time real relationship. This obviously has upset some groups. I think it's the right thing to do. I knew when we did it that it would be a volatile issue. It has been done in corporate America by about 30%, I think, of the companies, amongst them the biggest and most respected companies. We are obviously, because we're well known, a lightning rod for that kind of thing. And some very fundamentalist groups have taken exception to that.
Boycotts haven't hurt you.
I don't like being boycotted. I don't mind being boycotted for something that I think we did that was correct. Okay. I would hate to have made a big mistake and then been boycotted, because then I've made the mistake. I think they have the right. By the way, it is the American way. They have a right to call for a boycott. Right. The people that they called to boycott also have a right not to follow.
Competition.
Hate competition. I mean, I love competition.
Yes, you do. Who do you worry about? Do you worry about Gates and what he's doing at Microsoft?
Well, first of all, I really do believe what David Sarnoff said about competition was that...
Your first boss.
Kind of. That it brings out the worst in people and the best in products. So competition, basically, for the consumer is great. Because if there is no competition, you end up having arrogant monopolists. Who do I worry about going down the line, other than just another movie maker or something like that?
Exactly. I mean, when you see...
I guess the common wisdom is that the person to worry about the most right now is Gates. I think you have a combination of a very successful, wealthy person, a very bright person, and probably worst of all for people that are competing with him, a very young and healthy person. So he is motivated.
Yeah. And he's got the resources to buy things and take chances and a lot of others.
And he's had the experience of being a kind of a monopolist, and he's enjoyed it. He's kind of hooked on it. So I think we
you could like that.
I think we got to be careful.
Got to be careful.
Yeah, we got to be careful that we compete,
because we don't know where the technology is going to go and what it's going to open up, and you can't see around that corner.
And in fact, neither does he. See, we all think he knows everything. He probably doesn't know everything. And I don't know him. I've only met him once. So I'm hoping that he either gets too arrogant, which is maybe he won't, or he forgets something. We'll find it and we'll pick it up. But we have to be there. We have to make sure that, he doesn't own the television screen. I mean, he just doesn't. Everybody kind of said, oh, Bill Gates, he owns the television screen because he's got Windows. But ABC is there, and ESPN's there, and Disney's there, and there are other people that are there. So I'm hoping that I hope he's not watching this program because we'd like to be on his screen. But
you want to be on all those PCs, do you?
But we like to be on other people's screens too.
Okay. Two tough moments for you. Frank Wells' death. And partner, you must have said, how I've got to do this alone now.
Yeah, that was very unpleasant. I mean,
he died in a helicopter crash. A guy who was a mountain climber, who was Mr. Inside and you were Mr. Outside. He was management, administration, much beloved by the employees.
Yeah, what he was more than all of that to me was he was completely selfless, as I said at the beginning of the program. He was completely, first of all, very bright, and very effective, but selfless and loyal, and it was kind of like a marriage where you completely trust your wife and you know that when everything else is bad, at least your wife is there. Yeah. And for some people, not their wife, maybe their mother, but somebody is usually their dog. Somebody is there helping you get through whatever you have to get through. And Frank and I were very close that way. And what he said to me was always the truth. And for him, his specific talent, usually nobody is indispensable. You can find other people that are great lawyers and other people that are great businessmen and so forth. It's hard to find other people.
Other people to step aside and let you be number one?
Well, no. That was only a indication of his selflessness. I was happy not to share with him all of the financial and other glory of the company.
And you two complemented each other.
Yes, and people thought, though, that I was the creative one and he was the business one. In fact, I'm all right in business and he was very good creatively. It's just that people label you. But it was a difficult loss
like
for me.
Your arm.
Yes, and it was like your soul. It was like losing somebody that was very important to the company and very important to me. But it also was an example of what we all know is nothing stays the same. Nothing stays in cement. Everything is changing. Change usually is good, and whether it's good or not good, you better be prepared for it. No matter how good everything looks.
And then you had a heart attack.
Well, I didn't have a heart attack.
I mean, you had a bypass surgery. You had bypass surgery. You had a heart problem.
Heart problem.
Quadruple bypass?
Right.
There is this story that lingers about this.
I'm listening.
Your lovely wife, Jane, has a conversation with you, and you're about ready to go under, and basically the question is, what happens to Disney if I don't make it? The story goes that you said, A, there are only two people can run Disney if I'm gone. Or B, you said there was one. I've heard it both ways. I've heard you said it's either Mike Ovitz or Barry Diller. Secondly, I've heard that in fact what you said, the only guy who can run this company is Barry Diller. Is any of that true?
Well, I told Barry Diller, I said Barry Diller. I told Michael Ovitz, I said Michael Ovitz. No, I think what happened was, you have to understand, I was on a lot of morphine at this time.
I got it.
So I may have said anybody.
I just want the truth, as if you had sodium pentothal injected into your arm at this very moment.
What I said was, and how I said it is beyond me, because I was being an executive to the end. And I love the death scenes in movies. I remember John Mills and the singer, the song, and I mean, I never thought death scenes in movies were real. I always thought they were fantasy. So I was, of course, maybe that I'm a movie person. I was playing out a death scene here. I guess I came out of one part of the operation, and Jane brought in 2 of my 3 children to say whatever they were going to say. And I said, wait a second, before you go, I have 3 things to say. So my wife said, no, we'll talk later, don't worry. I said, no, I got 3 things to say. Like I had a pad ready to make notes. 1, I want to be buried above ground. Where that came from, I don't know. But I like California sun, I guess. I said 2.
Mausoleum.
I did. I'm like talking about my funeral. I did say that. Number 2, I said my wife and I had bought a piece of land, and we had designed a house which was too big and it was a pain in the neck. And I knew I had, but Jane wanted to do it because our house didn't have closets or something. But I was negotiating with her. So I said, Jane, if I get through this, let's sell it. I don't want to build a house. It's the only time I knew I could get away with getting my way. So I was negotiating with my wife to not build a house.
This is not good so far. I don't know what it says. But
so she said,
that's 2.
Okay. And I said, number 3, if anything should happen, what I would suggest to the board is either Barry Diller or Michael Ovitz.
You promised me you said either Barry Diller or Michael Ovitz.
No, I don't promise But that's the way it's going to go down. And only my wife and my children were there, and the anesthesiologist.
So you're not swearing that you said that?
Absolutely not. I didn't say it, but I'm not going to. I said something like that.
You're sure you didn't just say Barry Diller?
I'm not sure I didn't say. I don't remember. You got me. I don't know. I said one of those, either Barry Diller or Michael.
You don't remember?
Well, I was in.
We have witnesses there who could say what you said.
You just have to find that anesthesiologist.
You then chose Mike Ovitz.
Right. A year later.
A year later. He was the only guy you thought, why? I mean, why Mike Ovitz?
Well, I had known Michael Ovitz since he was 20, I think. I was a little older. And I knew what an effective executive he was. I knew how well he had done at William Morris, and when he started his own agency, how well he had done. And I had been talking to him about coming and working with me for 20 years. I tried to get him to come to Paramount and be head of television when I was president of the company. I tried to get him to come to Disney at various different times. At one time, I talked to Frank Wells about bringing him in, and Frank had said he would step down and become vice chairman, but we decided not to bring him in because he would have been in conflict with Jeff Katzenberg, and who was another executive at Disney at that time. So it was just complicated, and I had asked him over and over again, and he had turned me down, and I agonized over whether he was somebody that could be the number 2 person emotionally, and had a lot of conversations with him about that. He felt he could not. For the 2 years I talked about it, and finally he thought he could be, and so he went forward.
What happened?
Basically what happened was he probably would have been better in my job and I in his. He really is more suited to be the CEO than the COO. He wasn't as an effective a number 2 person as I thought he would be. And I think he was frustrated because he had been, number 1 for the last 20 some odd years in his own company. And he was in a private company, in a small company, going into a giant company, but still going into the number 2 slot. And that just didn't work out.
You knew it right away?
No, because I'm very optimistic. I'm kind of Panglossian in character, and I kept
And this was a huge mistake. Not in terms of how much money it cost you in the end, but in terms of your reputation, your judgment,
It wasn't good for either of us. I mean, it wasn't good for him because he has suffered because people think that he failed in the job, and I'm not sure that he failed any more than I failed with him in making it work. I mean, I take as much blame as he should take. It just was not going to work, and it was better. We both agreed it was better to end it quickly, rather than to be to have it damage either us or the company or be unpleasant going forward.
When you look back on it, did you do everything you could to make it work?
I think we both tried very hard.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, in a sense of giving him responsibilities, in sense of doing all that you could do, being willing to give up some of... I
think so. Without getting into, unbelievable detail here, I believe that I tried extremely hard. I believe that I was more than willing to share. I believe he tried very hard. And I believe that we both had something that made it very difficult, which was a personality. We each had our own personalities, and we'd each been doing things a certain way, and we were just two old dogs to learn new tricks. I think that's it. I think you know, the media has made much more out of it than it was. I mean, there are things that, you know, we were great when we dated. When we got married, it just didn't work. We should have lived together first.
Should have lived together first.
Probably.
Do you speak today?
I haven't spoken to him in a while. He has been off doing other things.
Oh, come on. I mean, that's a silly answer. Why haven't you spoken to him? Why don't you pick up the phone? Why doesn't he pick up? What's...
We will. It
takes time.
Yeah, it takes time. I think that he is hurt that I couldn't make it work for him. I think he's probably angry at himself for doing it. I think he will recover.
You think so?
Oh, totally. Totally. He's a very smart guy, and he's got
That's not even at issue.
Well, no, but he's got a lot of things going. He's very smart. He's got a terrific personality. He's got a good wife. He will survive.
You got a lawsuit with Jeffrey Katzenberg.
Who?
Somebody you once called your golden retriever.
I never called him ever my golden retriever. Right. Other people called him my golden retriever. He called himself my golden retriever, I think.
Well, maybe so. $250 million lawsuit, right? Says that, you know, because of the stuff that he started, should have gotten a percentage of it, and it comes to $250 million. This isn't good for you. Well, this kind of stuff. Why can't you put that behind you? Why can't you settle this and move on?
Well, first of all, it's in litigation, so you know I can't really talk about it. Yeah. And what he says doesn't necessarily mean that's what it is.
Yeah.
He is seeking money from the company because he thinks, or he's been led to think, that a contract that he has reads a certain way. We think the opposite, and that's what this is all about. By the way,
it's a contractual dispute between two very strong people.
By the way,
it's reached a level of animus, hasn't it?
No.
No?
No, I actually... It's so interesting. You know, it's just the way I am. I could never... When I was a kid, and I'd get in a fight with my best friend, I couldn't remember the next day why I was angry.
No, I can't either.
I don't... Yeah. I don't have any animosity toward him. I think he did a fabulous job. He worked with me for 8 years at Disney, 8 or 10 years at Disney, I think 6 years at Paramount. He and I worked great together. He got to a point in his career that he should have moved on and had his own thing, which he does.
Yeah.
And I hope and I think he'll do well.
Do you? Let's stop right there. You think DreamWorks is going to make it?
I don't know about their finances, but I know they're three very gifted people.
Of course they are.
There is no better producer, and I say producer because a lot of what they're going to do is producing movies, than Steven. Obviously, he's the premier director in the country, but he's also an excellent producer. David Geffen, who's one of the three partners, is legendary in the music business.
Right.
And frankly, he will be to them what Roy Disney was to Walt. He knows the financial end very well, and he will be a very good, let's say, a barometer of spending. He will be a very good, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but he'll be very good for the two of them. And Jeffrey is a excellent executive. So, on paper, they should make it. They should make it, and they should make it more than
But
soon.
you have some reservations as whether DreamWorks will make it because, first of all, it's a very tough thing to do. But
the only reason I would have any reservations, and I think they will make it, would be that the enormous amount of money that is being spent on it. It's a lot of money that they have to be very successful to make it back. But I think they'll make it, and you know what? It's good for the entertainment business if they do make it. It would be bad for the entertainment business if they don't.
I understand that you don't believe that the Disney company owes any money to Jeffrey Katzenberg. But it's hanging out there, and you got a lot of other things to do. Does the Ovitz settlement make it harder to settle with Katzenberg? Just to get it off the table.
I think first of all, I think you should know that the Walt Disney Company has paid Jeffrey Katzenberg, as it has other successful executives like myself, a lot of money. This is a contractual conflict, and we resolved in the way contractual conflicts are usually resolved, which is either in a settlement or in the court of law. The Ovitz thing is a completely separate situation.
But it doesn't affect this? I mean, it doesn't?
No.
You don't think? There's no...
No.
People are not going to say, well, if Michael Ovitz came there for a year and walked away with what might have been $100 million, Katzenberg's there for 10 years.
Well, if you take that logic, there are a lot of people that owed a lot of money.
Okay, speaking of your compensation.
We weren't.
Well, we are.
I say.
$700 million. Did you have any reservation about the publicity when you had that board of directors meeting coming up?
Well, first of all, I haven't earned anywhere near that. But I have worked there for 13 years, and the company has gone from a market value of $2 billion to $50 billion, something like that. And I had a salary that was less than the comparable salary to people in my position, and I took the risk with stock options that we would be successful. I will tell you that all the years I worked at Paramount and all the years I worked at ABC, a combination of which was 18 to 20 years, the stocks of the companies that I had been working at never went up $1. They were lower when I left than when I came, which doesn't say much about me, I guess.
No, I guess. Why did they choose you?
But I wasn't the head of them. But at any rate, so when I made my arrangement at Paramount, at Disney, it didn't. The history was not there that this is the place. But I took a risk on this. Frank Wells talked me into this, and we both took a risk on this.
Smartest move you ever made.
It turned out that we hit a great economy. We hit an interest in family entertainment.
And you managed it well.
And we managed it well enough. So we did well. I do not like the way it's characterized usually in the media, and it's too bad, but it's not too bad because it's appropriate that public companies have to reveal all this kind of information. I don't think I should be embarrassed about it. I think I've made a lot of people a lot of money and some for myself. But I'm constantly having to ask this question.
And I have to ask it too.
I understand.
Successor. Frank Wells, as you said, it wasn't the classic definition that everybody assumed, that he handled administration and law and finance, and you were on the creative end. And, as you said, he had some of the creative and you had some of the management stuff. What are you looking for? And why? Isn't it crucial that you find a number two?
Well, it's not crucial at the moment. The fact of the matter is there are many people inside our company who could be number two. Right. And I have made a big effort, and the board of the company has made an effort to meet and to interact with those people that are very strong inside the company. I'm not in this conversation going to name them, because when I start doing that, then I miss somebody, and I end up being very unhappy that I missed somebody who I should have named first. But let me just say that there are, and our board knows who they are, as do many other people, very, very strong people inside our company. At some point in time, it will be the right moment to indicate who they may be. But it's not now.
But they're in-house now.
Well, I would hope that the successor would come from inside the Disney company. It would be it would be unfortunate if I couldn't.
And you got good people like Joe Roth and Bob Iger and Litvak and others. And others, and I say others to people who. But what you combine, which people admire, is a creative. Tom Murphy has said this to me about you, the creative and the profit and loss thing, and that to find the combination.
Well, I was fortunate that I was brought up in a family that was only about business. I mean, I never met anybody. I never met an actor. I never met a writer. I never met a songwriter. Most people that I knew were lawyers. My parents knew lawyers and doctors and investment bankers. Yeah. So the fact that I had an interest in the creative side was good, because I could marry that with my background, I guess.
Your father used to say to you, for every hour of television, you got to read for 2 hours. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
And they said about your mother that she was so smart and tough that she should be running General Motors. Is that true?
Well, we said that about her. we said that about her. My mother was very organized. My father was very smart. They're both very smart. And there was no question. But the more than that is that I came from a environment of the importance of a strong family, and to me, that is the key element. That is more important than school. That is more important than, you know, whether you go to law school or business school, or whether you start off as an usher or start off as a, you know, getting somebody coffee. I think the environment of the family, having come from a very strong family, having to try to provide a very strong family for my children, is something that made me kind of appropriate for Disney. I understand Disney, and I think it is the area in this country that we really should be concentrating on. I don't think you can substitute for that.
Let me mention one other thing. Ted Turner. What do you think of this? $1 billion. Made a lot of money. What do you think? I mean,
I think it's great.
And he says here, I'm putting the rich on notice. Do you think we need more philanthropy from very wealthy people in terms of giving money to institutions, and that he's got a good point?
Well, more is always better. This country is enormously philanthropic, from the very top and the richest to the poorest person who's involved with their church group or involved with their local clubs or whatever. This country is the most philanthropic company by so many leaps and bounds. The idea of philanthropy outside the United States isn't even known. In a country like France, there is no such thing. It's all done by the state, from cradle to grave. So I think the country should be congratulated, not berated, for how already philanthropic it is. I think, God, I can't remember, it's 50 billion. I can't remember the figure, but it's such an astounding figure of what is given away every year in this country that nobody even comes close to it. So yes, he's a high-profile person. He's made a theatrical donation. He's on the cover of Newsweek. But I'm not sure the guy who gives $25 in church, and the guy who supports his local Y, and the guy who supports the Boy Scouts, which is as difficult for them as it is for Ted Turner to do $1 billion, shouldn't be the person on the cover of Newsweek.
Finally, architecture. You're being honored tomorrow night by the Architectural League here in New York City. I'm told that means a lot to you because architecture is a passion. What is it about buildings that somehow touches your soul?
You know, I'm not sure, because I've been trying to write a speech for tomorrow night, and I'm having trouble articulating that. When I grew up in Manhattan, and I just remember walking down the street and seeing some beautiful old building being taken down. And I remember being angry about that. I don't know why. It just angered me. And I'm like 6 or 7 or 10 years old or something. And then I can remember seeing just horrible, ugly buildings. You have to remember some of those buildings in the 50s were pretty bad. Yeah. And being angry about that. And then you would see the Seagram's building built by Mies van der Rohe, or you would see Lever House being built, or you'd see Eero Saarinen's CBS building, or Philip Johnson's Asia House. I'm talking about as a kid.
Yeah. You lived on Park Avenue and you could see something changing.
It was just amazing. I used to love the Super Constellation airplane. It had had that back that went up. It looked like, it just was so graceful and beautiful that there was something about sculpture and architecture that done well, and I didn't even know what that meant, created an emotional response that was either pleasant or the opposite. And I never even knew, other than renovating a bathroom, that I would ever have an opportunity to exist in the world of architecture until I came to Disney. And at Disney, we needed buildings, we needed theme parks, for business.
So why not go out and be a patron to the best architects in the world?
Well, I didn't know.
Take chances.
I didn't know about the word patron. I always thought patrons were people that were in wheelchairs, so I wasn't quite sure what patron meant. We needed a hotel, so you met with a bunch of architects, and it seemed to me it was just as easy to build a beautiful one as an ugly one. And the problem with architecture, as opposed to movies, if you do a bad movie, you put it in a vault and nobody remembers it. You hide it. You do a bad building, and there's not enough ivy in the world to cover it. So you're sitting there with a pretty monstrous-looking thing there that's your testament to your legacy, I should say. So I don't know. There's something emotional about architecture, and I can't describe it. And often it's more emotional than a movie.
Michael, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Michael Eisner for the Hour. Thank you for joining us. See you tomorrow night. Michael Eisner is chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company. His name has become synonymous with mouse ears and double-digit earnings. His arrival at Disney in 1984 ushered in a new era of innovation, prosperity, and expansion. Today, it is one of the largest media and entertainment companies in the world. Its vast empire includes film, television, sports, retail, theme parks, cruise ships, and now internet portals. His new book, Work in Progress, traces his 30 years in the business. I am pleased to have him back for a conversation exactly 1 year to this day when we sat here and talked about many of the things he talks about in this book, but there are more detail here, more interesting stories, and so I'm pleased to have you back. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Was it hard for you to come to grips with the fact that I've got to say in print things that people may know I think or things people have heard me say, but putting it on the page for everybody to read is a different matter?
It was less hard for me than for my wife, who was violently against it and told me I was running into a buzzsaw. And,
you don't need this, Michael. She
no,
said.
Why don't you, when you retire, like every other human being does when they retire, go off to Hawaii and write it then.
Right.
And the risk was being not an adult, being immature, not being a gentleman, and looking to people's dark side, as opposed to trying to do it from the bright side and the positive side. I have no interest in looking at everybody's negatives. I wouldn't work with people who only had negatives. I'm much more interested in looking at people's positives and trying to figure out how to run a creative company. I actually did this book to create a roadmap for myself. Frank Wells and I, Frank was the president of Disney, who died in a helicopter crash, figured out that all these media companies, of which he'd been at Warner Brothers, I'd been at Paramount and ABC, and after 7 years or so, the 7-year itch, kind of the business 7-year itch, sets in, and the thing explodes. People get bored, people reach their level of incompetence, people want to move on, and the institution falls apart. So I said to Frank, let's write a book. Let's write a book that outlines change. And if we write the book, then we'll have to do it. We can't write the book and then have this thesis. Right. Unfortunately, he then died, and change started anyway. And I was working with Tony Schwartz, who's an excellent writer, and who had been trying to get me to write a book with him for 10 years. And we decided to continue. And the process for me was, it helped me get through a lot of problems I had in the company, problems I had with health. It helped me kind of rejuvenate. It helped me create that roadmap and then follow it. And I think I probably followed it closer than I would have if I hadn't put it in writing.
What did you learn about yourself in writing the book?
That I'm only an average writer.
No, you're better than that.
I write very well in 3 or 4 pages, but to write a full chapter, Tony would write 20 pages after doing a lot of research, and I would turn it into 60 pages, and I think it was great and wonderful and funny, and he'd say to me, what, are you insane? Yeah. Who cares about your Czechoslovakian great-great-great-great-grandfather? And
your Czechoslovakian great-great-great-grandfather does.
Exactly. I learned about the book business. I learned about how to write a book. I was very proud that I was able to accomplish it and get to the end and rewrite it about 30 times.
And there's something valuable sometimes in looking back and say, what have I done right and what have I done wrong? And what's the guidepost that it gives me for the future?
Yeah, writing what you've done wrong is kind of interesting. You're in the middle of writing what you've done wrong and you're by yourself and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're still defensive. And you're still writing like you're talking to somebody and trying to make excuses. Yeah. So it's very hard to really accept your errors and put them down in black and white.
What was the hardest thing to accept to put in this book? The Ovitz decision?
No, actually, the decisions on the conflicts I had, the personnel conflicts I have, were rather short in my 30 years doing what I do. I generally get along with people very well, and I've generally had very good relationships. I think the hardest thing to do was to practice what I preach. And I preach a story has to have a good beginning, middle, and end. You have to start off strong. You have to make it enticing. So I didn't want to write a book that was boring. I didn't want to write a book that was 12 steps to better taxes or
yeah, right.
how to
be a good executive.
Exactly. I wanted people, when they read the book, to understand when it was all done how a creative company works. And frankly, the first 8 attempts, it didn't work. It was dull and it It was either too personal or not personal enough. It didn't have a spine. All the things I criticized directors for. And then in the end, I was the worst. In the end, it was 800 pages. I didn't want to cut it.
And, your editor said to you, Michael, not 800 pages, but 449 will be just fine. Thank you very much.
Well, not my editor, Tony Schwartz. He kept saying, you're the worst. You're worse than anybody you accuse.
Yeah. Here's what's interesting about it, having read it, is the way you describe people, which is a very good talent. A, you got to understand them. Here's what you said about Barry Diller. Barry was far kinder to those who stood up to him, which I've done ever since our first days working together. I assume something of a mother's role now, protecting the children from a brilliant and powerful but difficult and demanding father, much as my mother had done in our family.
Forgot about that. Well, it's true. I mean, I think Barry may even think it's true. He was the, well, I come from a family where my father was kind of difficult and my mother was kind of the middleman between us. And, you know, when I brought a dog home that I said I found on the street, but I really bought in a pet shop, and my father went bananas, my mother would step in and say, well, it's not so bad, and it's a cute dog, isn't it?
And that's the role you played?
Well, Barry was difficult in his younger days, in his ABC days and his Paramount days, and he found that I could be a good conduit between him and the rest of the staff. And most of the staff that worked at Paramount were scared to death of him. And he may not like to think that, but he was pretty frightening. He was short, and he was smart, and he suffered fools not well. And I was constantly saying, oh, that's not really Barry. He really loves you. And so I was the middleman, and I really guess I forgot that I had written that maternal piece, but that was kind of the way it was.
Well, listen to this. As for my own relationship with Barry, it was far closer than people imagine. He was explosive where I was more even-tempered, at least that's my view. He would probably argue the exact opposite. He looked at the world darkly and saw troubles at every turn, while I was upbeat and optimistic. He was single, childish, and highly social. I was married with a family and barely social at all. I mean, what I'm saying is these are interesting, acute observations of people, and you're laying it all out. This is the way I saw it. One person who's a great friend of yours, who you go bicycling with, consider when you...
He hasn't read this yet. Maybe my bicycle trip days are over with him.
Well, but wait a minute. When you were here on this broadcast, you remember, I said to you, what was the last word you said when you went in to, and you write this story in the book, when you went in to be operated on for quadruple bypass surgery in the morning? Jane was there, and she basically said, what do you want to say? And you said, first of all, I want to be buried above ground. Thank you very much. Secondly, I don't want you to build that bigger house, please. Right. Thirdly, you
negotiating from the deathbed.
Thirdly, you said, if it doesn't work, the two guys that can run the company, Diller, Ovitz. Roll tape. This is the previous interview. Take a look.
If anything should happen, what I would suggest to the board is either Barry Diller or Michael Ovitz.
You promised me you said either Barry Diller or Michael Ovitz.
No, I don't promise that. But that's the way it's going to go down. And only my wife and my children were there, and the anesthesiologist.
So you're not swearing that you said
absolutely not. I didn't say it, but I'm not going to. I said something like that.
You're sure you didn't just say Barry Diller?
I'm not sure I didn't say. I don't remember. You got me. I don't know. I said one of those, either Barry Diller or Michael.
You don't remember?
Well, I was in.
We have witnesses there who could say what you said.
You just have to find that anesthesiologist.
You want to amend this record now?
No, I should say not.
Because you pretty much repeated in the book the way you told me that night.
Well, I went back and looked at the tape. I wanted to be consistent.
Let me talk about the company. In the last... Since May, stock's down, what, 42%? My question, how did you feel when you saw Larry Tisch was shorting your stock?
Well, that's a good question. That is a really good question. Nobody's asked me how I felt. I had a lot of people run into my office. Could you believe what Larry Tisch has done? And I thought, I'm going to call him up. And then I thought, what am I calling him up for? So what? I mean, you know what? He's been saying the market's going to go down when I first went and met with Larry Tisch in 1985, and the stock had gone to 100. Now that's 3,200 ago. I mean, it's split 3 times since then. So it's like at 6. He said to me, "The market is in disastrous shape. Sell your Disney stock." I said, "Well, I've only been in the company, 6 months. What do you mean? Get out, get out. It's crossed 100." He said, "Larry, if I could, I wouldn't." So finally, 14 years later, we hit a speed bump. The world economy hit a speed bump. There was a sell-off, and he made some money on selling us short. So I really should call him up and congratulate him and ask him how much he lost in the 13 years waiting for this to happen.
When he didn't bet on the up.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Are you worried about the stock? I mean, why is this happening today?
You know, I'm not worried about the stock. I'm sure I should. I'm sure a CEO should be like agonizing over it. I've never looked at my Quotron. I remember, I was out here because you're in the
Bloomberg's
Bloomberg
here,
building,
right?
and
They
I
have
tried
terminals galore.
and I don't even know how to use the one I have in my office. I look at the stock, rarely. My view is the stock market is a very good gauge of performance. And therefore, what I should do is perform well. And therefore, I look at scripts, I look at parks, I do my job. And I assume over time, the market will reflect our good performance. I know we're doing well. I know the only reason it's down is we had to put an announcement that we're not going to be this year the growth that we've had for the last 13 or 14 years.
25% or something.
Yes, we've been doing, we're up 3,300%, so we're down a little bit. We've invested in Disney channels around the world. We've invested in ESPN around the world. We're building parks around the world. We're doing the internet portal initiatives. All these things we're spending money. We've had a couple of movies that were too expensive but still did well. Some of our television shows haven't done that well. The ABC television network itself has been having some. So we have a few problems. The earnings are still up from last year, slightly, but they're not up the way they were. So the stock market goes down. That causes one of two things: no sleep or opportunity. So I choose opportunity.
What's the opportunity?
Well, I don't want to be too obvious, but if your stock market
Buying back the stock is what you're
if
saying.
it goes down below the intrinsic value and the market overreacts to some bad news or an analyst report or a bad movie or something, and you think it's cheaper than it is worth, and you know the company, then you have an opportunity to buy it back.
So your chief financial officer might say, look, it's a better investment of us now to go in and buy our own stock than many things that we can do, because we have that much of a belief in the company.
He could, yes.
He could.
He could.
Are you hurt by what's happening in Asia? Are you hurt by the general sort of Asian contagion that is affecting the world in terms of demand for Mickey, demand for the products you sell?
Well, it's good news, bad news. For instance, China, we are not in a tremendous way. We've gone slow. Therefore, we're not hurt by the slowdown. And if it picks up quickly, we're not going to be helped that quickly. We have been very cautious in Latin America and Asia over the years. We are in these places, but we are not in it in a insane way. We haven't built a park in either Latin America or Asia, other than Japan. We are hurt slightly, very slightly in Japan. Our Japanese markets, our businesses are doing fantastically. And the theme park in Japan is like still setting records. But our home video business, for instance, in Asia and in Europe even, is slowed a little bit. And that is part of the speed bump that we're experiencing.
You talk about the buying of ABC. It's a stunning story. You're at a meeting, you're at Herbert Allen's thing out in Sun Valley, or wherever it takes place, Sun Valley.
Sun Valley.
By chance, you run into Warren Buffett.
Well, I had to walk up and down that road about 4 or 5 hours to hit that chance. Well, actually, that's not quite true. I bumped into him. I had already planned that I was going to bump into him somewhere. I had already planned that I was going to bump into Tom Murphy, who was the CEO of ABC, somewhere. I went to Sun Valley to make a presentation, and it didn't work out. I didn't bump into him. So I got my bags when it was over and decided I'd go home. As I was leaving to go to the condominium to get my suitcase, first I bumped into Larry Tisch,
Right.
who was about to sell CBS to
Who
Westinghouse.
acknowledged to you that, in fact, he was about to sell, and the board had already had already decided and voted on it.
Yes, and I said, how about Disney buying CBS? And he said, that's a better idea, or at least his wife did. And then I walked down the street, and there was Warren Buffett, and I said, the funniest thing has just happened, Warren. I bumped into Larry Tisch, and I think we can buy CBS, unless, of course, you want to talk Tom Murphy into selling us ABC. And he said, that sounds like a good idea. And then I said, but I don't know where Tom Murphy is. He said, well, come with me. I'm going to play golf with Tom Murphy and Bill Gates. I said, okay, and he dragged me down the street, and there was Tom Murphy, and he said to Tom Murphy, Michael wants to buy ABC for cash. I think it's a good idea. How about it? Tom Murphy went back on his heels and said, well, let me think about it, but maybe not for cash, maybe for stock. And That was the beginning of the conversation. A week later, we shook hands.
Sitting there in a parking lot talking about a $20 billion merger.
Well, I've been talking about ABC and Disney getting together since 1984, so it was a 10-year romance and a 10-second culmination of that romance.
Was it the best deal for you to make looking back, or would you have been better buying NBC, as you talk about, or CBS?
No,
what fit better?
ABC has been a very good acquisition for us, and it was absolutely correct. The reason it is ABC has strong management, and ABC has fabulous assets. ABC is much more than the ABC television network. It is the owned stations. It is ABC News.
It is ESPN.
It is ESPN. It is Arts and Entertainment. It is the History Channel. It is the E! Channel. It is Lifetime. It is a series of international investments. And it is, of course, ABC, which I know very well. I worked there for 10 years. So we got those assets, and those assets help us compete with Rupert Murdoch and News Corp, and they help us compete with Time Warner, and they help us compete with Bertelsmann and all the international companies, and they ensure that our products will get to the marketplace. And there's great growth in those assets, because ABC eventually will have to change its relationships with its affiliates, and eventually it will repurpose programming, and eventually our soap operas will be part of a separate soap opera channel, and eventually news will be repurposed, and eventually we'll multiplex ABC as the technologies and our contracts come up.
When you look at network television, is it a good business to be in today? It is if you have all the product that you make, because it gives you a place to put some of it, especially the Disney stuff.
If you have ABC, which has a license for NFL football, and you have ABC that has Diane Sawyer and Barbara Walters and Peter Jennings and Ted Koppel and Sam Donaldson and people I'm not mentioning who I'm just forgetting who I'm going to be in trouble with tomorrow for not mentioning them. And you have ABC that has owned, and they do own, All My Children, One Life to Live, General Hospital, and so forth. And if you have ABC that has Disney and the Wonderful World of Disney and One Saturday Morning, and you have that as a package and it's a network, and you then will you now project yourselves 5 years out, and you have a digital broadcast spectrum where you can now multiplex and time shift all of what I just described. So you could see Nightline at 8:30 or you could see it at 11:30. You could go to cable and you could multiplex it and you could do a soap opera, ABC2, and you could do soap operas now that people who are not home during the day can see All My Children in prime time. You reverse and you repurpose your program. And then you say to your affiliate, who you have been paying for all these years, sir, it is not economic for us to pay you anymore because cable is paying ESPN and cable is paying TNT. We'd like you to pay us something. Oh, you don't want to pay us because you never had? I understand. We may see whether the ABC network should be distributed through satellite or should be distributed through cable.
Maybe we don't need your affiliation.
Maybe we don't. We have the software. Now, they may tell us to shove it, and we may have nowhere else to go, and everything I'm just saying to you may be a big, big mistake, and I may be totally wrong.
That battle has already been won, hadn't it?
I wasn't at ABC, and there's no question that the networks lost that battle. Larry Tisch at CBS took a kind of position I'm taking, and it was too early. It was the right position. It was too early, and it was a little arrogant. You got to do. Our first goal would be to stay with our affiliates. I'm not just saying that so tomorrow when they see the show and it's passed around and the affiliate board has a meeting to discuss Michael Eisner. I'm not saying it just for that reason. Our goal would be to stay in partnership with our affiliates. We've been in partnership with them for 50 years or whatever it is. We have no reason not to be in partnership.
But you are saying if you're not willing to pay us, we have alternative means of distribution, so don't feel so comfortable in the way that we've been doing business since television began.
Well, let me ask you the question. What is fair and not fair? The ABC television network hopefully will break even. Just the network. Now, the owned stations and some other things do very well, ESPN.
So the ABC television network will hopefully break even.
Just the network.
CBS television network will not break even.
Probably not.
Lose money.
Probably.
NBC make money because they've been number one.
Yes, some, not a lot, because they're paying a lot of money for ER and so forth. Okay, so we'll make money or we'll break even. Our stations, our affiliated stations, one of the biggest companies just announced giant profits and 52% margins. And they told us, meaning they have, of their revenues, 52% go to profits, which is an enormously attractive thing for them.
These are big stations in big markets.
And they very nicely told us, and they have the right to tell us, that they wouldn't help us pay for football. They, we put up $9 billion so they and we could continue with football, and they're not paying for it. And I have a long memory. They will pay for it, but they may not pay for it for 5 years. I think that's short-sighted. We have to be a partnership. If they're going to get programming, they have to help pay for it. And the reason they have to help pay for it is our competitors who make the same programs are getting paid for it. So you'll take a USA network, Mr. Diller's network, who not only gets paid by the subscriber, but also by the advertisers.
Right. We get dual revenue sources.
Right. We only get advertiser, and we pay out to the affiliates. And now let's say Steve Bochco, who does NYPD Blue, comes in with a new show. He can outbid us. ABC is going to end up being irrelevant if we don't address the change. And we have to address it with them. But my issue is there's growth here. ABC is growth. In the meantime, our stations do extremely well. ESPN, all that stuff does well. That cash flow from that great institution called ABC is helping us
subsidize the network.
No, build hotels, build theme parks, build things all over the world. In other words, it is that cash flow that is extremely valuable for the Walt Disney Company.
Is there a piece that you think you need, like you felt like you needed a television network, to make the whole pie whole? What do you need now? You just started Go Network. You made a deal with InfoSeek, so you've got a portal, as I mentioned. You're going to go strong on the internet.
Well, the only thing we needed for the first 12 years I was at Disney, and all the years I was at ABC, and all the years I was at Paramount, was a good idea, whether it was Beverly Hills Cop or Happy Days or The Lion King. So then we figured that we really needed, on a defensive basis and to be competitive, we needed Capital Cities ABC. I think the only thing we need now are hit shows, hit parks, hit ideas, and I think the management that we have is equipped to do that. And the book is basically about how do you manage a company that, unlike Coca-Cola, which is a fabulous company but has one product, Disney, which has thousands of products, and maybe we need 50 a week. So how do you deal with people who are wearing red tennis shoes? How do you deal with that? An executive comes in, he has red tennis shoes. Now, if you're working for IBM, you probably send them home.
What if a guy comes into you and he's wearing red tennis shoes, but he's just written a screenplay that's going to earn you $150 million at the box office?
I'll send him 10 pair of new red tennis shoes and ask him how many more he wants. Well, you're making my point. In my business, you have to think about people in a much different way than you do in a business that only has one product that has to be remarketed all the time.
You feel like you can meet any crisis in business. You have been through enough storms so that you can sail this vessel through any kind of adversity that you meet.
No. I think the one crisis that this whole generation has never been through, and I worry about it, is a real economic setback. My grandparents lived through a depression. In my career, I lived through, for instance, at ABC, we were fourth among three, and I went through a couple of recessions, and I've been at Paramount when we were all being fired. I've lived through business problems, serious business problems, but I've never lived through a serious world problem. Since I was born after, or as the Second World War ended, and since then it's been pretty good in this country. The people at Disney have never lived through any crisis.
Except good times. Yeah.
Yes, I'm like one of the older people there now, and all the young people there have, it's gone up and up and up. Stock options have gone up and up and up. What happens when there is a real crisis and earnings, everybody's like melancholy because we're only going to go up 1% instead of 20%. What happens when we go down 40%?
Answer your own question.
I think that's going to test the mettle of all of us. I think we have not been trained for that kind of world. I was trained for a highly inflationary world because I worked for Gulf and Western in the 70s. So I understand what a highly inflationary world is, how difficult that is. I have been trained for a world of failure because I was at ABC when we were failing. But I've never been in a depression. I've never been in a time when people are starving. And I've never really been in a war. And you know, everything doesn't stay perfect forever. And I hope that I have the strength, and that our company has the strength, and that other companies have the strength to adapt.
So what do you...
If that happens. By the way, everybody tells me it's not going to happen.
Yeah, but other people will tell you that it's possible.
It's always possible.
A recession is possible.
It's always possible. Well, recession
is not there, I know, but it's the first step.
Right. Deflation. I mean, nobody in this country since World War II has ever dealt in a deflationary period. The rest of the world has. Is that possible? All these contracts you make with unions, with executives, with everybody, where you get, 3 years of 3% increases, or you get, pay the guy 100,000, 125, 150. Everybody is on that. What happens if all of a sudden it's like this and it's deflation? Every contract, every part of your business, everything you've learned since you graduated from college is inflation, even if it's small inflation.
How hard was it for you to, this is another issue, to pay whatever you had to pay to Michael Ovitz, somebody that I admire and like a lot, Jeffrey Katzenberg I don't really know, settle a suit there? How hard was that for you to come to the decision and say, all right, we're going to do it?
Well, it wasn't like that. It was in his contract. Nobody thought he wouldn't survive his length of contract.
So that was okay?
Well, it's not okay, and you take a lot of criticism, but it was fair, and he gave up a tremendous amount to come to Disney and all the rest of it. So that wasn't hard. Sometimes it's hard paying people that don't deserve things and don't have contracts.
And that's where you felt about Katzenberg?
No, absolutely not.
That was fair, too?
More than fair. Katzenberg, I mean, Michael only worked for a year with us, and it was just a contractual situation, and he gave up a tremendous amount to come to us. Katzenberg worked with us, worked with me for 10 years at Disney and longer at 5 years or more at Paramount. But Jeffrey Katzenberg, in his 10 years at Disney, really participated and really contributed. So everything Jeff Katzenberg got and is getting, he earned. The only question about Jeffrey Katzenberg is whether or not I thought he could be president, replacing Frank Wells, which I didn't. He thought he should, and he left. All the rest of it is basically media speculation.
Yeah, but your own story is, in this book, Work in Progress, is that when you looked at it, you decided that he had his own agenda more than the company's agenda, which had been your observation of him in the years past.
Only in the close to the end. The years that he worked with me at Paramount and the years that our most productive years at Disney, he was a complete team player. He got to the same age that I was when I came to Disney.
42.
42. I think he became restless for his own moment in the sun, completely in the sun. I think he had some advisors that were advising him incorrectly about how to achieve that. And I think what happened was I decided that he was perfect for the job that he was doing, but not right for the next job. I could be right or wrong. I think I'm right, but that's irrelevant. I had that decision. I had to make a decision. He thought he should have his moment, and he decided to leave. He was not fired. He decided to leave. His contract was up. And the only thing that made it a little more juicy is that we live in a media frenzy, and he was hurt that he didn't get that job, and probably correctly so. I was annoyed at the way he asked for it, and we had a little spat.
Have you reconciled these two relationships?
I don't think that they'll ever be what they were. I'm happy that we have Spin City on ABC, which comes from his show since he left the company. I know he probably doesn't believe it, and most people don't believe it, but I do hope he's successful. Why wouldn't I? He worked his ass off for me and for Disney and for Paramount before that. So he deserves to do well, and it's not going to affect us one way or the other. It's not like it's going to hurt Disney, so I can be generous. Maybe I'm more generous since I had a bypass operation.
I want to come to that. So what was that bypass operation? How did it change you, and it was a metaphor for what?
I don't think it changed me. I wish it did change me. I wish I was less competitive. Although
no kidding.
Well, no, I see people that are 95 years old, and their testosterone is still flowing, and they're
yes,
still
and so
competitive.
will yours. And so will yours.
And I came out of my general anesthetic, and I was negotiating my press release. So I have not become less aggressive or competitive.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate. kind of like a curse.
I mean, have you asked for help in this problem?
Well, my wife thinks I'm still too competitive, but I think that I'm not hypochondriacal anymore. I have no fear of flying. No. I think I went through a very near-death experience. It wasn't so bad. It wasn't so bad. Maybe it was the morphine. I think it was the morphine. I felt pretty good about it. I was sitting there. I was going off. I went to sleep. I woke up. I was healthy.
And you began thinking about, I've got to sign up the doctor because nobody will believe this unless I get the doctor. You know, because so many people make the mistake of saying everything is great, and if you have the doctor saying it, it's much better and more credible. That's the first thought you had.
Well, I snuck into that thought. What I did was I made a big stink that we had to have a press release from the company because most companies weren't honest about the health of their CEO. What I really was thinking that if the doctor said I was healthy, then I probably wasn't being lied to. But I'm such a buyer. I've been a buyer of programs all my life. I'm so used to people conning me that I didn't want to be conned about my health. So I figured he couldn't possibly lie on a press release.
Speaking of buying, Bludhorn once taught you this notion that it's more important what you pay for something than it is what you sell it for, correct?
Right. It's all about buying. It's all about buying. It's all about buying well, not putting yourself under a tremendous cloud of debt, buying for a price that is less than its intrinsic value. And then you can hold it, and you don't have to sell it. And if the day comes that you can sell it, and if you've bought it cheap enough, it's all profit. Yeah, how you buy is the essence, not how you sell.
That's the talent of Warren Buffett.
Oh, it's the talent of, I think, all great entrepreneurs. People get lucky. People find some, sitting duck out there that comes from the moon who comes in and buys their hotel for 20 times what it should be, and they make...
They'll sell it for 30 times what it is.
Yeah, they make one little killing. It's kind of the greater fool theory.
Greater fool theory, you're right.
But the real smart people, they're the ones that are the great buyers.
What you do every day, make decision. What part of it do you like the best? What part of it, is it movies? Is it television? Is it the way they fit together? Is it betting on the future? Is it choosing the right person to do the right job? Is it what?
Well, some days, the best part of my day is going to work. And other days, the best part of my day is going home. Every day is very different. We have enough different businesses that every day is a series of very good news. I mean, I'll get a call from Joe Roth, who runs our motion picture and television group, and tell me about this great screening we had. 5 minutes later, I'll get a call from Bob Iger, who runs our television operation, who will tell me...
A great pilot he's seen.
Or a terrible pilot he's seen. Or then I'll get a call from Florida, and the state's on fire.
Or they're facing a hurricane as they are this
hurricane,
evening.
or our cruise ship is like, can't go. Every day is a series of good news, bad news. And I'm not sure whether I like the good news better than the bad news. I've never been good with good news. Bad news, I kind of like get myself up for. I start getting into action. Good news is like, I'm not good when somebody compliments me, because do you say thank you, or do you pretend that you're embarrassed, or do you say, yes, I know I'm this, but bad news, oh, you get together, call so-and-so, do this, do that.
You're a pretty good judge of yourself.
I don't know. I hope
you
I
think
am.
so?
I don't know.
What would it take to get you to leave Disney? What challenge would be big enough, interesting enough, fun enough?
I was thinking about mortality. Oh, nothing.
Nothing.
I can't think of anything better than being able to talk to the coach of the Angels and understand why they lost 5 to Texas in 1 minute, and talk to Bob Iger about Bill Clinton and the ABC News and his problems the next, and talk to Joe Roth about the screening of Tarzan for next summer, or talk to Peter Schneider, who does our animation and our theater, about Elaborate Lives, which is Elton John's new Broadway show, which I'm going to see tomorrow in Atlanta. How much more fun could I have? I mean, I can't imagine anything more fun except for doing nothing.
How did you feel when Lion King turned out to be huge? And you bet on somebody, Julie Taymor, who proved to be a genius.
It was certainly very gratifying, and if it wasn't that the same day there were probably 8 disasters going on, and something happened at a park, or some book was band in Boston or whatever.
So you couldn't fully enjoy it?
I think people that are in my job, and I think if you talk to Barry Diller or Jeffrey Katzenberg or Steven Spielberg even, or many people, you so work in the future that sometimes you can't enjoy the present. And one of the problems in the media business...
This is really serious. This is serious.
It's sick is what it is.
Sick
it's not
is what it
serious.
is. You can't enjoy it?
Well, I don't know. Maybe we're just all...
Because you're worried about A. It's not that it's going to go away.
No, I'm thinking about... I'm in the middle of worrying about the movie or the symphony. Let's take a symphony we're working on that plays January 2nd, year 2001. That's my problem today. And are we going to do it first in Aspen as a tryout, or where are we going to do it? At the same time, I'm talking about a book I just finished writing. And I should be very gratified that somebody even wants to talk about it. Two, that I actually finished it. It's like finishing a term paper. You know, when you finished a term paper in college, you really felt great.
Yeah.
You had the weekend ahead of you. There was the Orchid Ball. There were parties. It was a great date. You felt fabulous. And you didn't have 100 things that you had to do. It was over. It's never over at Disney. There's always something on the horizon.
There's always somebody waiting to see you with a problem or a conflict or a choice that may go well or go bad.
But it will always be fun. Or there's your own family, which also you really want to participate in.
When you meet the president, do you say, I could do this job?
President of the United States?
I could run this country. I could manage.
I don't think I could do it for a second. I saw those tapes, and I watched him sit there for 4 hours. I would have been crazed. I can't even sit still for 4 hours. So I don't know how he does it. Forget the issues and all the rest of it. The lack of privacy, the pressure. I mean, I have pressure. Did the book work? Did the movie work? That's nothing. He's talking about the Middle East and Israel, and he's talking about Bosnia,
and
he's talking about,
and everything.
you know, when our economy goes, our little Disney economy goes, it's meaningless. Yeah, I think our investors probably are upset. The U.S. economy goes, people starve to death. I think we underestimate the pressure and the magnitude of that job, or maybe we don't. That's why we're so interested in it. But I think it's pretty awesome.
You'd never want to do that? You'd never want to have that responsibility? You'd never like that challenge?
Well, there used to be a television show where you had a job for a week.
Yeah,
and you could go do that.
You tried for a week.
So if somebody would let me do that for a week and I could like sit in the chair, I've never been upstairs in the private quarters. I'm one of the few in Hollywood that haven't. But
now, why is that?
I was never invited, and now of course I can't go because I would look terrible. But
Yeah.
but
You've never been invited to spend the night. Have you given money to the Democrats? Not enough to be invited to the Lincoln bedroom.
No, I could probably get to the ambassadorship of some country you've never heard of.
Bermuda, maybe.
Oh, no, that's a big ambassadorship. No, it would be fun trying to figure out. But you know what I think is very difficult? Corporations are mini dictatorships, in a way.
Yeah, sure are. And that's why a lot of business executives do not make good politicians, because they're not used to going out. They're used to, in a sense, saying, do this, and make it happen. Whereas in politics, there is a political process that you have to take care of.
Totally. And most very good business executives like Jack Welch, who is one of the great executives of GE, and I think he probably is very fair and all the rest of it, but he does run it. And I don't run it even like he runs it. There's much more of a teamwork at Disney. But in the end, if you have a problem and you really feel strongly about it, you can say, no, we're not going to do that. And you can't do that in the political process. And by the way, you should not be able to do that in the political process. That's too much power.
So if the next president of the United States came to you and said, listen, you have done what you've got to do at Disney. I mean, it's in great shape. The stock has turned around. Everybody's happy. You're on the go. It's time to leave. And because I want you to be in my cabinet. I want you to be
Secretary of the Parks.
Secretary.
I can run Yosemite.
Is that good? Right. What do you think of the president and his problems? And what do you think he ought to do? And where do you come down on this?
I don't think it really is my place in my position. Well, I'm going to punt only in that I'm the president, the chairman of the Walt Disney Company. Our job is to entertain and bring fun and lightness and happiness. We're supposed to be our company is nonpartisan. Obviously, I personally feel badly about it. I think that a lot of mistakes were made, behavioral mistakes, and then after the behavioral mistakes, mistakes in handling and dealing with those behavioral mistakes. I also think that people piling on is unattractive. I don't like it when they pile on me. You know, when you have a bad day, for everybody to use that moment to really kick you when you're down. So I think almost every piece of it is unattractive. And therefore, I'd like it to go away as fast as the process could have it go away. Frankly, I'm nervous about things like the economic situation around the world and things that should be dealt with.
Better things to focus on.
Yes, and I think he is focusing on them, and I think the Congress does focus on it. And I think if there was any kind of emergency, we all rise to it. But it's getting distasteful.
Let me ask you a couple of personal questions that are beyond this. Who's had the most influence on your life? Other than your wife, Jane, and other than your parents?
Teachers that I had?
Yeah, just whoever. I mean, Frank Wells clearly had some influence on you.
Yeah, I think the biggest influence you have is 0 to 10. I mean, I think, you know, there's a song in Lion King, it's He's in Me, referring to his father.
Yeah, right.
And I think it really hits a note to the audience because no matter how old you are and how many times you've satisfied whatever relationship you're living out in your relationship, in your dealings with your parents, you're always still living those out. So I think what happens in early childhood development is still the most important. I remember my friends in kindergarten. I hardly remember my roommates in college.
Is that right?
I mean, well, obviously I remember, but I can tell you, I could describe in detail every single person who was in my 8th grade class.
Have you kept up with them?
Not a person. I can tell you what my room looked like to every lamp and every dresser when I was 6.
If I look back at 9-year-old you,
right,
and look at you today, I could see the connection. If
totally.
the 10 years of that formative.
Totally. By the way, I see the connection of my 28-year-old son and when he was 2. I think that we all underestimate how important that young childhood development is and how important the family is and how important nurturing is and how, if you don't have it, what a disservice you leave for that child and how that child ends up maybe getting into antisocial stuff because of it. So on the positive side, that's the negative side. On the positive side, I remember vividly my grandparents. I remember vividly people in my house and my sister at that age. I remember vividly parents of my parents coming to soccer games and things like that. I mean, those influences. I remember my gym teacher. I remember what I can hear in my mind what he called me on the basketball court. So those kinds of things, I think, have substantive influence. I remember my camp, which is the most important place I went to.
Because?
Because I loved it. Because I loved the teamwork. I loved there was a tripping camp. I loved the canoeing. I loved the getting together and cooking dinner.
What do you think you would have been if you hadn't become a corporate executive?
Well, I never could have been a corporate executive in kind of a real business. I mean,
you had to have the joy of entertainment.
I just don't think I would. I don't think I'm good enough, competitive enough in just, you know, standard one product business.
Making cars.
Well, there's design in making cars, so that would be kind of fun. I always loved camp. Maybe I would have been I don't know.
Camp counselor.
I love camp, and I always thought that if I got fired, and when you're in my business, you always wait to get fired. It's like being a coach of a baseball team.
You wait to get fired?
When I went to ABC in the 60s, everybody was being fired right and left, and ABC was doing terribly, and Milton Berle was making those jokes about put the Vietnam War on ABC, it would be canceled, it would be over in 13 weeks. So I thought I'd get fired. I thought Barry Diller would get fired. And I always wanted to get fired like in April or May so I could go that summer and be a counselor at the camp I went to. It was like, it just was expected that you would get fired because everybody does in one of these businesses. And I still hope if I get fired, it's in the late spring so I can go back to camp. They may not want me now, a little old, but I wouldn't mind doing that. It's
great to have you here. Michael Eisner, Work in Progress with Tony Schwartz, a story of what happened when he came to Disney, 1984. Came to Disney. You and Frank Wells, the 1994 Frank Wells died, but the story continues with new partners as Michael engages in the stewardship of this company and a lot of other things. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure to have you. Michael Eisner, we'll be right back. Stay with us. Without referring to today's market, what's going on in the economy, and how does it affect your company?
Well, there seems to be a malaise, a fear of the massive amount of money that was in the market. Smaller investors may be taking their money out of mutual funds. Kind of a sky is falling feeling. I think Greenspan now moving a little bit more pessimistic than he was 6 months ago. We heard, we're at this convention here in Santa Barbara, and we heard Jack Welch talk about his leading indicators. He may have talked to you about it, but the light bulbs, the lesser light bulbs, buying one instead of buying six.
Right.
I think there's a general feeling that we're going to go through some hard times.
Do you see it in terms of movies, in terms of theme parks, in terms of the products that you sell?
Well, we have various different kinds of products. Obviously, we see it to a degree in the advertisers wanting time on our networks, on ABC and so forth. So the advertising community is a little skittish and being cautious. Our theme parks seem to be strong. We have good reservations going forward. I call every day. One day they say there's a little fear about reservations next summer. So it's not quite as strong as maybe last year at this time, but it's not. The sky is definitely not falling. We think we're going to have our biggest movie year. Of course, movies are somewhat recession-proof, but Pearl Harbor, Atlantis, we have big movies coming out, and movies are an inexpensive thing for the public to do to be entertained. So I think we're protected in movies, and the Disney brand is strong. Outside the United States, our stores have bounced back. Inside the United States, retail generally through all areas, including Disney, is a little weak. So it's a mixed bag, but it's I think reality is setting in, and people are finally learning for the 10,000th time that you don't get nothing for nothing. So the internet bubble bursting, so to speak, is hardly a surprise.
You were always nervous about it.
I was trained by Charlie Bluthorn, who was the chairman of Gulf and Western when I was at Paramount. Paramount was an owned company of Gulf and Western. And this was a very creative but very conservative man who believed in using other people's money and values. And when I came to Disney, I took that with me and brought some strong financial people in who kept teaching me all that I didn't learn, having never gone to Harvard Business School or any business school. And I looked to value, and I listened to Warren Buffett, even during this heyday of buy, and I took a lot of gas for not really diving into the internet and buying some of these expensive internet companies, and I just look at the values, and somehow, we were making, I don't know, $4 billion of operating income, and Yahoo was making maybe $400 million, and they were valued at twice our company. Now, something tells you that's not right. And Yahoo is a great company, but it just hadn't had the 100 years of history of the Disneys.
What happens when there is a tough time? Do you cut back? Do you fire people? Do you lay off people? Do you restrict? Do you cut back on your advertising budget, your promotion budget, your research and development budget? Do you put less things in the pipeline? What do you do?
Well, you do a little of all of that. You act prudently. You certainly don't want to have your cost basis go up. So you trim. You should be trimming always, every year. But sometimes during a economy that's weak, where everybody is trimming, it's a little easier to do. It's kind of the PR is less devastating as long as you do it well with your people. It's also an enormous opportunity for the strong, and the brave, and the courageous. And few fools.
All right, so let's assume you were strong and brave and courageous. So what are you going to do?
Well, I hope that I'm going to recognize that when the equity markets really come down, and they're still maybe slightly overvalued in technology and in some media companies.
I mean, most of them have lost 75 or 80% of their value at the height.
That's in the internet sector. In the television stations, in the radio stations, and in the cable franchises and in content companies, they haven't lost that much, but everything is overvalued, and the courage, nobody needs courage to buy into a bull market. Oh, let's buy.
Everything's going up, so buy.
It'll go up forever. It's a little bit like mortality. We all know we're mortal, but we all act like we're immortal. I see people on their deathbed. They're still fighting. They're still going to get that last. They're going to win that last game. And the fact of the matter is, that's the way it is in business. People act immortal, and they're not. They're mortal too. And so, in a really good time, you've got to hold onto your seatbelt and say, you know, maybe we shouldn't participate in this insanity. And you take a lot of criticism from the media, from investors, from people that want to make money, from people that are watching CNBC like it's a slot machine. And then in bad times, which we may be coming up with, you have to have the courage to buy a company that may be a little bit hurting because it's been hurt by the economy. It may not seem as glamorous as it was 6 months ago, but the basic ingredients, the basic economic factors, the basic synergy with the Disney company is good. So you have to do, again, the counterintuitive thing, which is you have to buy when everybody is saying sell. Now, whether I have the courage to do that or not is going to be another question.
Okay, but I mean, that makes you look prescient, in fact, if in fact you say there were too higher prices were being paid for those acquisitions that took place, and the wiser was to hold back and wait for it to turn down, and then if you've got a good balance sheet and a lot of cash, you can make prudent investments at that time. But did you worry, and do you worry, that you were too cautious? And Viacom was out there making acquisitions. AOL made Time Warner a bigger company. News Corp was looking to expand. And so all of a sudden, Disney has, among the top four, has less of a competitive strategic position.
It's so funny, we're kind of considered the wimps. And meanwhile, in 1995, which was only 6 minutes ago, we made the biggest acquisition in the history of American business. We bought Capital Cities ABC. Nobody had ever spent $19 billion at that time for an acquisition.
And how long ago was that?
5 years ago. So it's not like a millennium ago. It was 5 years ago.
But let me just make a point. That ought to encourage you to buy more, because ESPN today is worth more than you paid for the entire thing.
Not buy more, just buy well. Just buy smart. Just be intelligent. We saw the advantage. I worked at ABC for 10 years in my earlier life, and I understood the assets, and we acted. And yes, we have been in the last 4 or 5 years very much on the sideline. I mean, people think we're kind of like wimps, you know, even though we made this giant acquisition in 95, the biggest in the history of American business at that time. We've stayed back a little bit the last 3 or 4 years. They say, well, how is Disney competitive? Well, we're the largest company in Southern California. We're the largest media, most profitable media company in the world. We have a pretty good brand, a unique brand. We have ABC and ESPN and A&E and History Channel and, I don't know, Disney and Miramax and a lot of other things.
But you also let some things go by.
Well, we didn't let anything go.
You let Nickelodeon, you let Hanna-Barbera, you can let...
Well, nothing in the last 5 years. We had back, 12 years ago, a piece of Viacom, which has Nickelodeon.
Right.
We determined at that time that it was not right for our brand to be sliming people. We thought that that Nickelodeon brand in the early years wasn't consistent with the Disney brand, and we had 5% of Viacom. We took a big profit when Sumner Redstone took it over, and I danced all the way to the bank thinking I had avoided a tarnished brand and saved my little old Disney brand.
Yeah.
Well, in hindsight, sure, we'd love to own the Nickelodeon brand. I'm not sure we could own the MTV brands. I'm not sure that kind of programming specifically for the Disney company it fits, but it could. Now we're so big it could. Look, you never get in trouble for something you didn't do. You get in trouble for something you did do.
Are you by nature cautious? And are you by nature a person who would rather, A, buy cheap, and B, grow it your own, grow it yourself?
I am all of that. I'm not clinically schizophrenic, but I am schizophrenic in business. On one hand, I am a risk taker.
Yeah.
I love creating new movies. I love building things itself. We just did an Us magazine arrangement. We're here to Talk magazine piece. These are little acquisitions. I love building from scratch, but I love making the animated movies that turn into big hits. I love putting it all on, Pearl Harbor and stuff like that. But I don't want to bet the store. I grew up at ABC, and I saw them in different ways bet the store. One mistake bringing you completely down. I think that's stupid. You should always know that if you go into something, it can be a mistake, but it shouldn't be a mistake that bets the store. So in that sense, I am cautious. I want to sleep at night. I want my shareholders to not wake up as they have as AT&T shareholders, ended up with nothing. I mean, can you imagine my in-laws and people that I know who would invest in a company like AT&T forever because this was a place to preserve their wealth? These are the kind of people that get hurt when you run a company, or it's not even AT&T's fault. It's when the world changes and you have shareholders that don't know how to change with the world, and they're the losers. So I feel an obligation to be somewhat conservative with Disney. Now, having said that, there's a door. I see this door, and one end of the door is, let's say, Universal. And Universal was the greatest entertainment company my 30 years in the business. And Universal is gone. Lou Wasserman was the #1 executive kind of all time. I think he was the CEO for 60 years of Universal. And they just were too conservative at the end. And now the French own Universal, which is just fine. That's on one side.
But they had the leverage to do all that.
They could have been it. And they looked down that door and they were too conservative. And then the other side of it is the door that goes to the guys that bet the ranch. And you and I both know who they are, and in an economy where it goes up 18 years in a row, they're coming out pretty good at betting the ranch. But if you bet the ranch in a down economy, you could be like having your ranch in foreclosure. So I want to be in like the middle door. Does this make any sense?
It does.
Because I've never thought of it this way. These metaphors are really ridiculous.
No, but that makes sense. But I'm trying to understand also mindset. Those other guys would be Rupert Murdoch. Those other guys would be Sumner Redstone. Those other guys, in fact, would be Jean-Marie Messier as well.
And
those guys
companies
are deal makers, and you're a manager. I mean, do you approach it differently, do you think?
Well, I heard Jack Welch talk last night that he made 235 acquisitions or 300 some odd acquisitions last year alone.
Yeah, he's both.
And he also talked about how he doesn't manage any of the businesses. He manages people. He gets great people. And he's built General Electric into this fantastic company. I'm different. I love the movie business. I love creating the parks. I love the ashtrays in the hotel rooms. I love working with the architects. I love the product. And I love managing people and having a teamwork and being out there, all for one and one for all. And so I think that's where I add value. At the same time, I've got to be a manager. You can't run a company with 125,000 employees and be like a flake.
No, I'm not arguing that point. I'm not even arguing any point. But I mean, you clearly are that. Your reputation is, and we've talked about this before, is a manager who's also plays a part in the creative process. I mean, you are the king of that idea. You know more about the making of. I bet you Rupert Murdoch doesn't know anything about the movies he makes, that 20th makes. I mean, he sees them at the end. You are there talking to the director and looking at the whole creative process. Not only about that, but Lion King. How big an interest did you take in Lion King?
Big, but that's not necessarily good with Disney as the size as it is. Maybe those people would rather say, get this guy from the past out of my office. Well, he should worry about, how much, cash flow. Yeah. We are going to have
or what deal he can make and how he can affect
the fact of the matter is, everything in my life gets better by having a hit, and it always has. All of the problems with IS and IT and purchasing and all that stuff and too much overhead, it all goes away with a big hit. Yeah. So that's really a stupid way to look at business.
So Pearl Harbor could make a big difference in...
It can make a difference. I don't know how big because we're so big now.
I can make a better example. Millionaire with Regis made a big difference at ABC.
Totally. And still does. The point is, in today's world, every company is different. Disney is a company creating content, and therefore I think you have to have management that understands content. At the same time, we have 125,000 employees. We have $2 billion coming in free cash flow. We are a big institution. We are an honorable institution. All over the world, people look up at Disney as a symbol of American entrepreneurship, and I am a steward of that, and I can't screw it up. So because I can't screw it up, I wear a suit one day and I wear a T-shirt the next day, and I'm on both. I'm very conservative financially, and I'm very risk-taking creatively. We have Julie Taymor which is a big risk, does The Lion King for us on Broadway. We're about to do a risky on Broadway Little Mermaid. That is what we are. and I love it. I mean, that's what I think it's fun.
So do you have no regrets or any fears about how your primary competition in this age in which we have giant media companies, Viacom, Vivendi, Universal, and News Corp, you don't worry that they're strategically placed better than you are?
Well, I'll answer it in a roundabout way. They're definitely not strategically placed better. We are probably the best placed strategically if you believe in content and you believe in brand, and we're the only one with a brand, and we have the greatest content in the world. That said, I get a phone call from Barry Diller, who says to me, Michael, I just want you to know I've just been in Boston and I've met with the 7, institutional investors, and I'm beginning to hear, kind of what you were just telling me, all these other companies are really strategically directed. Yeah. And you don't have a strategy that they're jumping up and down and saying, boy, that Michael Eisner, he's just as good as Mel Karmazin or whatever. So, of course, I yell at him for telling me this. I say, why are you making me so unhappy? I hang up. I call our CFO and 6 other people, and they say, call that dope back, lovingly, and say, these people don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. They are in a herd mentality. The people that they're referring to have overpaid for their assets. Right. It's going to come home to kill them, and just do what you're doing. So I feel better. I call Barry up. I say that in a nice way. He says, I just was the messenger. Don't yell at the messenger. So, you know what? There is no right and wrong. Yeah. So the common wisdom today is buy at any price, be big, be this, be that. I'd rather buy at the right price if we're going to buy and have my shareholders benefit from our improving the asset than buy at a very inflated price, kill myself for the next 5 years to justify too high a price.
But you are on the look right now because we're heading into some rough water, and there will be some, as Bob Iger said, perhaps there will be, for someone who has the balance sheet we do, some distressed stocks.
I have been waiting for this for 18 years. I am so excited. We have an unbelievable balance sheet. Yeah. Our debt is really falling. We have $2 billion going up of free cash flow. We have a solid company. If the world comes apart, and I have the guts, and our board has the guts, and Sid Bask, who's my major advisor and major shareholder, has the guts, we're going to go out and make history and reposition the Walt Disney Company for the future. However, that said, we have handcuffs on. We can't go out and buy anything that could damage our brand. We are the Disney company. We can't go buy a telecommunications company. We can't go buy a drug company. We got to buy something that is commensurate with our abilities to manage it, that is in the generally content distribution, exhibition area. And we don't want to lose Disney. We don't want to become Disney one little dot in some General Motors of something else. So we've got to do everything I just described with the handicap that my competitors don't have, because they can't hurt a brand, they don't have a brand.
I just want to underline what you said. You are so excited right now at this stage because of the balance sheet and because there may be real opportunities out there. With all the caveats you said about the brand, you're saying to me, you're looking at the landscape now because it may be a very interesting time for you and the Disney company.
Change creates opportunity. But that said, I am, as you know, the most optimistic Panglossian person around this pool and at this place.
That's true.
And if it was going up, I would find optimism about selling. If it was going sideways, I'd find optimistic about some new animated movie or some live action movie or some new television show or One Saturday Morning or SoapNet. SoapNet. You don't even know about SoapNet.
No, I don't.
This is the greatest thing that's happened to our company since chopped liver. We don't even have chopped liver.
What is SoapNet?
We're at 8 million homes on cable, going to 30 very quickly. We take the soap operas that are in prime time on ABC, which we own, which are the #1 soap operas, and we repurpose them, and they play in a cable channel called SoapNet, which is like ESPN. We have Soap Center, like we have Sports Center. And in the 8 million homes they're in, we just got the first ratings. In women of all ages, we're the #1 cable channel, and we've only been up 6 months.
How many subscribers?
8 million going to 30,
Okay.
and when the cable companies see these ratings going to 70,
Right.
and SoapNet for our company is going to be for women, and serials what ESPN is for sports. So now I'm more excited about that than the market going down or going up or whatever.
And we had to take a break because the lighting is a little different here because of the fact that you had to go participate in a panel, including about intellectual property, which I want to get to. But let me go back to where we were when you left this conversation earlier today. By the way, this is a perfect place to do a television show, isn't it?
This is beautiful. I understand it took them 25 years to build this hotel.
Yeah.
What a sight.
75 acres or something here.
It's beautiful.
There's something about living by the water, or being next to the water.
Because we're
good for
fish,
the
we want to
soul.
go back to the water.
You know, that's exactly what Jack Kennedy said. He said the
Really?
reason people like the water is because they're 90% something, a makeup of water or something like that. Is there, when you sit here now with this good balance sheet and this cash and the fact that they're depressed prices of companies, it's a perfect time to be on the look for a acquisition fit. Lots of people say to you and write, why not Yahoo?
Well, somebody just said to me, because I did, in this break that we had, I did CNN Live and I did CNBC.
Right.
And one of them said, now Yahoo is about $18 a share, and that's about the fair price for Yahoo. Are you interested? So I said to him on the little earphone, so I didn't know him or know where he even was, well, help me out. You tell me the economics of how Yahoo at $18 a share is the appropriate price for the Walt Disney Company. And I think I flustered him because he said, I'll call you after the broadcast. And the fact of the matter is, depends what you're looking at. And take Yahoo out of the equation.
Yeah.
If you look at economics and earnings and cash flow and all of the things you're supposed to look at to bring a return to your shareholders, and it doesn't make sense, then you shouldn't do it. If you're going to buy a home and the home is more expensive and the mortgage is more expensive than the combined salaries of you and your wife, so you know you're not going to be able to mortgage, you shouldn't buy it. On the other hand, if you're prescient and you're a futurist and you're brilliant and you can see that, yes, today it doesn't make economic sense, but in the future it's going to be such a home run, it's going to be such a barn burner, it's going to earn so much money that the price you pay today is really nominal compared to what it's worth. So you tell me, and I really don't know the answer.
All right.
I really don't. Is Yahoo just a better version of Go.com? In other words, is Yahoo
A company you just shut down.
right? Does it just work, and is it great? Because it is great, and I use it, but it has no subscription basis like AOL has.
Right.
It's completely advertiser supported. It has no own content. It uses other people's content like Reuters and anybody they can make a deal with, and it's mostly a commodity. That's the downside. The upside is it's a worldwide brand. Everybody knows it. Maybe they'll figure out their strategy to migrate into the broadband world. Maybe they'll figure out a subscription strategy. And maybe I'll be sitting here with you in 10 years and you'll say to me, you know, you are the dumbest person I've ever met. How did you miss Yahoo?
I doubt that, but let me ask you the question this way. You had an opportunity to buy it at $9 billion, $8 billion, or $9 billion at one point?
I think 40% of it, something like that. They want us to take a piece of it. That's right.
Was that a good deal in retrospect or not? Looking at just the market value today.
No, as it stands today, it was a terrible deal. As it stood 6 months ago, I was the idiot of all time. Yahoo was double the size of the Disney company, and I could have gotten 40% of it for $8 billion. But it would have been a short dance around the Christmas tree. So what happens is you've got to value it at its earning potential, and it had great earning potential for a while.
But have you soured on the internet is my question.
No, hardly.
Well, you closed down Go.com.
Well, Go.com has...
You're not buying it. Yahoo.
Go.com is a portal. Go.com is and was, as is a few others, a commodity. Search is no longer unique.
Right.
Chat is no longer unique. Mail is no longer unique. That's what Go was. Now, our internet sites, like ESPN.com, like Disney.com, like abcnews.com, like abc.com, like family.com, like movies.com, which will eventually be our HBO in the internet space, and Mr. Showbiz, and on and on. They are real sites, and they are going to be blockbusters. And when we go to broadband, we'll be streaming shows on Disney.com. We are now interactive all over the place with Disney.com, with kids on a program called Zoog. ESPN, as you know, we do Monday Night Football. We do the Academy Awards on interactive television, what we call enhanced television. No, the internet is not only real, it is the most changing technology in the face of entertainment. It just ain't here yet because there's not enough broadband distribution around the world to have what we do look great.
Okay, explain to me then where you want to be on the internet then. I mean, you would not have made a deal with AOL that Time Warner made. You wouldn't have made that deal if they wanted to buy you.
No, but we would have been, AOL is the real thing.
And they did want to buy you.
Yes, yeah, they did. They did. But
so we'll just stop there. So,
well, you know what?
Steve Case comes to you when he wants to buy you. You could not get him out of the building fast enough.
Well, let me ask you a question. I don't know if you wanted to buy me because we never actually had this conversation. But if you are in college and you are calling up the most beautiful girl on the campus,
yes,
what do you think your motivation is? So I think that they wanted to buy us.
Yeah.
Maybe just wanted to take me to dinner.
No, but they didn't. They wanted to buy you. He understood, and you call him very smart because of it.
He's the smartest person in the entertainment business today. Now, he may be the dumbest in 3 years, like we all go from smart to dumb. But right now, he is my idol. He is my idol. Nobody has done what he's done. Nobody in history.
What has he done?
I'm on dangerous territory here. What has he done? Well, let's see. Henry Luce.
He is your idol and your hero.
Totally.
Because?
I don't even know him. But because he's done something that's beyond doable by a human being.
Which is?
He took Henry Luce, created the greatest magazine empire in the world, starting with Time magazine.
Yeah.
Okay? Ted Turner changed the face of cable, creating CNN and the like. Jack Warner and his brother created the greatest movie company with the greatest library in the history of the movie business. I'm exaggerating that slightly. I would say maybe MGM too, but pretty big. Steve Ross accumulated the greatest assets of record companies, comparable only to pay maybe CBS.
Plus cable properties.
Plus cable properties. Right. Oh, that's right. Plus Jerry Levin. I'll give Jerry Levin credit for that, of assembling one of the two greatest cable companies, including having New York and a lot of other places. They took all of that, at the absolute high for AOL, higher than high's highest, and gave 55% of that to Steve Case. It should have been the other way around, by leaps and bounds.
So Jerry Levin made a bad deal if he gave more than 25%. The deal that was appropriate, perhaps, was Jerry Levin would have taken 75 and AOL 25. That might have been appropriate in a merger deal.
On an economic basis, maybe, but he's going to come back and kick my butt because the economics be damned. They still have this. Now they have, which is
a powerful combination.
Which is his point, having 45% of the combined AOL Time Warner is better for my shareholders than having 100% of all these other great assets.
And guess what else? Steve Case was smart enough to understand Jerry Levin and to know that he didn't have to run it. He could be chairman if he put the deal together, and Jerry Levin could get what he wanted to run it, which shows you he has some smart understanding of what makes people tick.
Well, Steve Case, however he thought it through, made a great deal. I really believe that Jerry Levin was more interested in protecting Time Warner for the future for his shareholders, and he was very frustrated, as we all were, by the internet. He couldn't make Pathfinder work. He couldn't get people to talk inside of Time Warner. They all were kind of skirmishing, and he saw AOL as a final solution. So I think that's what he was doing. The fact that he ended up running it was probably the right thing for the company, irrespective of Jerry Levin. So I think Jerry Levin had the right motivation. I just think Steve Case, and it's been proved, I thought it at the time, but it's been proved, had a highly overvalued stock, which he took 100% advantage of. I mean, that's like, you read about that once a century. That's going to be...
Doesn't it baffle you that Jerry Yang and his colleagues didn't take advantage of their market value at the same time?
No.
When they had a market value of over $100 billion to go out and buy earnings?
No, because that's human. Steve Case was inhuman. Steve Case just was outsmarted his own natural emotional body. When you create a company from scratch, it becomes over $100 billion, and it's Yahoo, and Yahoo is everywhere, and they have their own culture. They were invincible. They thought it would go forever. They were immortal. So the natural thing for them was to stay independent, not in the end the smartest thing possibly.
If they went out and hired the smartest investment bankers in the world, whoever they are, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Lazard, whoever they are, and said, we, Yahoo, with our market value at the top, we want Disney, could you have withstood them?
Oh, yeah. There's no...
You were so confident about this.
Yeah, there is no board in the world that's going to take a company that makes $300 or $400 million and allow that company to take over a company that makes $4 billion. It's just, there's no economic sense. You could turn it down in 1 second. It's a phone call. There's no board. There's no shareholders. It's. You could make an argument. I had no fear of that at all.
And shareholders are not going to sue the board saying, what in the world are you thinking about? Look at the price of this stock and look at the price of this stock, and you turn that down?
They may sue the board, but and I think they would lose, but you, of course, never know what happens in court. I just know one thing. I can't stand in front of my shareholders and say that we are going to sell out to a company that's 1/10 our size. In
no matter
reality,
what the price of their stock.
It's irrelevant because the stock, here's what's important about the stock market. And I'm telling you, like, I'm this great Harvard Business School graduate. I didn't go to business school. I went to like a liberal arts college.
You don't know where Harvard is.
Here's my arrogant statement about that. The stock market over time is an accurate indicator of value. Over time. But there was not enough time that had been played out on these internet stocks to allow the fair market value. Over time, if Yahoo had stayed at those prices, it would only stay at those prices if they went from 300 million to 800 million to a billion or whatever else.
So what are you going to buy?
I don't know. You know, it's very hard because it's like going into and I don't have any patience, but it's like going into a great, antique store, and there's this giant discount.
Yes.
But every piece of furniture you look at is a little chipped. This one's chipped. This doesn't have a leg.
Yeah.
This one needs to be varnished and fixed. There's not going to be any company in a down market that doesn't have some problems and some risks. That's why it's down. That's when you have to say, okay, I can fix that leg because the rest of the desk is fantastic. But I'm going to get it cheap enough that I have time to fix that leg, as opposed to buying at the height of the market. Same leg is broken, but while you're trying to fix that leg, the rest of the economics don't support the price.
Let me ask you this before I leave the internet and leave what acquisition strategy you may have and talk about these intellectual subjects like intellectual property. Your board recently rearranged your bonus for tax considerations, I think. Help me if I'm wrong here. And gave you, for the year 2010, plus $1 million, correct?
Well, they did a lot of things.
And some options in what was, as I understand it, an internet.
No, what happened was I have a very long-term deal.
10 years from 96.
Right. And what happened was my deal had a formula in it for a bonus. Because of the acquisition of ABC and all of the changes in the way Disney has been put together, my bonus would have been so stratospheric that it was not, just on a technical basis, on an accounting basis. So instead of giving me and I agreed to it because it would have been unfair, instead of having my formula count and me saying, okay, here's my formula, we just took me off the formula and put me on a discretionary bonus so it was reasonable. So that was one piece they did. The other piece they did was not a penny of additional value for me. They restructured something so in the event that I'm wrong, I was wrong about Yahoo or AOL or something like that, and somehow he got taken over, which was impossible anyway, there wouldn't be golden parachute provisions tripped. That's all passed.
Was it painful for you, though, a couple of years in which people said Michael has lost it, and you had suffered a year there where you didn't take a bonus? Did you? I Embarrassing
No.
may be a better word.
No, neither, because I always thought that I got more credit than I deserve in the first place.
Did you really?
Well, you always think you're always questioning, really, am I as good as that article said? And you say to your wife, am I really that good? And she says, no, you're not. And
Well,
then you feel better about yourself. You can't. I've been CEO of Disney for 17 years, and I was 8 years president of Paramount before that. And you can't succeed without taking risks and without, laying your creative soul on the line, all the time. So to think that you can have a hockey stick up, and never have, a problem. We never had a disaster. We had a couple of flat years. Everybody was expecting us, 20%, 30% every year. We had that for the first decade. We had
that for about 14 years.
Yeah, and my board, was fabulous. We never talked about it.
Can you continue to have the same kind of growth rate you've had the first 14 years?
Well, when you start at $1.5 billion market cap and you move to 60 or 70 or 80 billion dollars, to have the kind of growth from $1.5 billion to 80, you'd have to grow from 80 to 400. People have done it. Jack Welch did it.
Jack Welch says it's easy to operate a big company.
Jack Welch spoke last night. I took notes. He said things that the reason he's so brilliant is he's so obvious. In other words, what he says makes sense. I talk to some people and they give me business stuff, and I go get in the elevator and I say to the people I'm with or my wife, I didn't understand a word he said. Jack Welch
makes sense.
Makes sense. Yes. It's just obvious. Yes. And when you hear something that makes sense, you say, why didn't I think of that? Yeah. That's good thinking.
There's a man who understands how the world works.
Exactly.
Both in terms of people and in terms of ideas.
Right.
Speaking of ideas, you have spoken before the Congress on intellectual property, cyber theft. Where are you on that? I mean, where are we in terms of the threat to intellectual property, to the hard-earned work of artists?
I think it's the biggest issue facing us. I think it's a giant issue facing the country, and I think it'll resolve itself beautifully, because property as a sacrosanct issue is part of the American culture. It's one of the fundamental things like freedom of speech. It's 60 times mentioned in the Magna Carta. It is John Adams and all of the people who drafted our way of life had a love of property because they didn't want to be serfs again in England, or to have some kind of fascist state come in and take your property. And they also put in the Constitution that intellectual property is property. And America's edge could be, they didn't say this, but it is understood, the creation of intellectual property. 6.5% of our gross national product is out of intellectual property. We have gone from 30 to $80 billion a year of foreign money to the United States paying for intellectual property. It is more than agriculture. It is more than aircraft. It is more than autos. It is more than chemicals. It is the biggest single exporter out of this country. And people all around the world know that America has the edge in intellectual property because we have this religion about it. So no MP3 maker, hardware maker, is going to undermine the United States cultural heritage by selling 3 more MP3s. And what we have to do is we have to do 6 different things, 5 or 6 different things. We have to, first of all, educate our young people that stealing a movie or stealing a computer program or stealing music or stealing an image and giving it to everybody anonymously is as wrong and unethical as walking down the street and taking an apple off a fruit cart. And I believe they know it. We have to reinforce it.
Well, then, are you saying that what Napster was doing was offensive in part because it suggested that copyright was not important?
Patently illegal is what they were doing. They were aiding and abetting theft.
And suggesting it was okay to take somebody's
intellectual property. And then trying to create a moral imperative that theft is okay in a certain section of life. And the irony is that the hardware makers, I would like you to throw this entire interview away because I'm going to get in such trouble in 20 different places, but now I'm going to another one.
Right.
The hardware makers are on the edge of saying theft is okay, because a lot of computers are sold because of Napster, a lot of MP3 players because of Napster. But what they don't know is their ass is going to get kicked, because the world is moving to a broadband world, and their routers and servers and all the computers are going to be sold to get video files, movies, pictures, intellectual property, if you will. And if the movie companies either won't make them available, or because they've all been stolen, that a film like Dinosaur that we made, which we spent 4 years making with 65 million gigabytes or megabytes or whatever it is, and is gone, and a $300 million of investment, including marketing and distribution and production, is gone, there won't be anything for people to buy computers to put on them. And so the hardware makers should see the light and say, we believe in intellectual property, because that intellectual property is going to do the same for us that it did for television stations and radio stations and movie theaters. They're so short-sighted.
Enhance your market.
Create the reason for their being. There is, at some point in time, commodity is a commodity. And we have in our rooms...
So who are you talking about? People like Sony?
People like Cisco, like Sony, like Dell, like all of them.
All the people who make hardware.
All the technology people who are going to get their next big push because they're pushing content down the tubes, and special content. They're pushing Pearl Harbor down. They're pushing, whatever the latest movie is.
Pearl Harbor.
I'll stick with Pearl Harbor.
So you went to Congress and you showed them Dinosaur. Did you find a receptive audience down there, and you explained to them what would happen?
I mean,
are you asking for legislative protection?
We're asking for yes. First of all, I went to Congress. I gave a speech in Congress. It happened to work pretty well. I think it changed the momentum. It showed that the 6 things that we have to do, which includes legislation,
right,
litigation, education, which I talked about, and mostly presenting an alternative to free, which is relatively inexpensive and high quality and easy to get. Because if you don't offer that, it's like prohibition. If you don't offer a decent alternative, people are going to do the wrong thing. But if you offer the decent alternative and they know it's wrong to go the other way, people are basically good. They're not going to steal. And if they steal 10%, we get more than 10% stolen now in the analog world. We can live with a 10% steal. We can't live with a 100% steal.
This ought to be the best time in the world for content producers, because a small percentage of the world is digitized, and the digitization of the world is going to open up all kinds of access to new eyeballs for you.
Absolutely. I believe that the future, the digital future of content companies is insured. And the only thing we have to do is people like me, and I'd rather be sitting on a set or at a drawing board or hearing a script being presented, but I have to go and speak to education and legislation and litigation on copyright, because I got to remind people it's like freedom of speech. You'll have no show, there'll be no Disney, we'll all be like what it used to be like east of the Iron Curtain. It'll all be, how a flower grows. It's not a mistake that they've been aggregators of talent. We put on The Lion King. We aggregate a director, a producer, a set designer, a theater, a musician, a composer. We aggregate talent. Somebody has to aggregate talent. It doesn't have to be Disney. It can be anybody. But if you take all the economic underpinnings out of it, there is no place for the aggregator. And then there's no place for the talent. Yes, there'll be talent, but I don't know how you get the kind of talent that, if this show is stolen, who would do the show? It doesn't work.
Have you ever wanted to direct a movie, make a movie? You love the creative process.
Well, yeah, it's like saying to a 13-year-old boy, have you ever wanted to play and bat, fourth in the lineup at the World Series?
Of course. The answer is yes.
What else
Easy.
do you think about when you're lying in bed at night as kind of the romantic thing to do? Yeah, I've always wanted to direct a movie.
You would never take time off and say, I'm going to do this because?
Well, I actually had a point in time that I had before Frank Wells died, and when everybody was getting along real well with Jeffrey Katzenberg, that I was going to go off and direct Ethan Frome.
Is that right?
I wanted to direct Ethan Frome. I never thought it had been done well. And then I realized that I probably would have more impact, and it's more my calling to be an editor rather than a director. You know,
It'll never happen.
I'm probably too embarrassed to have to face the people that I work with to say, like everybody else in town that we make fun of, oh, I want to be a director. So, you know, my son's a director. I'm living vicariously through him. So,
Yeah. Only because Esquire magazine recently had a story in a very recent issue, March maybe 2001, in which you revisited the time you had the heart attack.
I did?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. About they took somebody from each decade, a male from each decade from, yes, right.
Right. And you
That
told
guy was a very good writer.
You told the story again, how when you felt the pain, they said you got to be operated on soon.
Right.
Your wife stops you before they're rolling in, and you had three things to say. One, you and I've talked about before. Who will be your successor?
Right.
Here's the two I don't get. The other was you tried to convince your wife as you're being led into the operating room not to build a house.
Right. I'm about leverage.
You
I'm about, you think when you're about to die, you would, this I was talking about before about immortality.
Yeah.
You think when you're about to die, you would say,
have bigger
okay,
things on your head. Idea.
Right. I never liked the house, but I never really knew I didn't like the house. And my wife kind of did like it, and it was up high, you know, and I just went through my mind, she'll feel sorry for me enough on this gurney that she'll say anything to shut me up.
See, this says,
and I'll get a commitment not to build a house.
This says volumes about you. You know that.
Well, I told you I was crazy.
And thirdly, you picked out the place you wanted to be buried, or told her where it was.
Well, no, what I said to her is, I have no idea where this came from. I said, I want to be buried above ground, not in the ground. I had this image of having, you know, I can remember my kids saying, when you die, they put you in the dirt and they throw sand in your eyes and dirt. You know, they asked these 4-year-old kids asked this question. And that image of being buried underground, I guess, has stayed with me in some peculiar way. So as I was really facing it, I didn't think about meeting my maker. I didn't think about giving away, you know, my golf shoes, which I don't even have. I thought about, I didn't want dirt in my face. Who knows? Who knows? So,
you're not going to retire at 65.
No. No, I will never retire. I may not be the chairman of the Walt Disney Company. I mean, they could throw me out at 64 and a half.
Maybe out making Ethan Frome.
Yeah, maybe doing Ethan Frome, exactly. Edith Wharton is finally going to be seen. But I'm not the type to slow down. If I have 20 minutes, I'm at my typewriter. I just can't stand. I just can't stop. So and it's not just about emails, which I love, but it's. I love email. I just think it's the greatest.
Why?
Because it's like